Maybe somewhere, in a very distant branch of reality, another version of you chose the path you once missed and is still living a life that you only sometimes feel in your dreams. Welcome to Drift into Quiet Knowing. Tonight, we will slowly step into a question that is strange, deep, and deeply confusing to human beings across many generations. Do parallel universes really exist? Not as a sensational story, and not as a rushed claim that somewhere out there must be a copy of you, but as a quiet journey across the fragile boundary between science, the cosmos, consciousness, memory, and the things we still cannot name. Maybe at some point in your life, you have had a very small moment that stayed in your mind for a very long time, a choice that has already passed, a word you never got to say, a person who drifted away, a door that once opened, then closed again in silence. And sometimes, in the middle of a quiet evening, you wonder, what if I had chosen differently back then? Is there only one single stream of life flowing forward, or somewhere deep within the structure of reality, do the possibilities that never came true still continue to exist in some way? The strange thing is that this question, which sounds as if it belongs to a dream, actually touches some very serious areas of science. Quantum mechanics once forced us to rethink the idea of one single outcome. Cosmology has raised the possibility that the universe we can see may not be everything that exists, and the human brain itself, in dreams, in the feeling of déjà vu, and in distant, fading memories, sometimes creates the sensation that we have just brushed against another life, another layer of reality, another version of ourselves. If you stay until the end of this journey, you will not just hear about parallel universes as a mystical idea. You will understand why science has not been able to prove them with certainty, but has also not completely closed the door on this question. You will see why reality may be wider than our senses, why the choices we have lost still carry weight in the mind, and why human beings are always drawn to the possibility that this life may be only one of many paths through existence. Now, set everything down for a moment. Let your breathing slow. Let the room grow quieter. Let the thoughts of the day dissolve like a thin mist. And come with me into tonight's gentle question. Do parallel universes really exist? There is something very strange about human beings. We do not only live in the life that has already happened. Quietly, we also carry the lives that never happened at all. A road we never turned onto. A person we did not hold on to. A house we never bought, a letter we never sent, a phone call we meant to make, but then left the phone lying still on the table until night came down. All of those things do not disappear completely. They do not have a shape like a chair in a room. They do not have weight like a book in your hand. But sometimes they still return so clearly, so softly, so deeply, as if somewhere inside the mind there is another room, where old possibilities are still breathing. And maybe it is from that quiet room that the idea of parallel worlds begins to feel so powerful. It does not begin with complicated formulas on a blackboard. It does not begin with telescopes staring toward the edge of the universe. It begins with a very ordinary question. What if I had chosen differently back then? What if I had gotten on that train? What if I had taken that job? What if I had spoken honestly sooner? What if I had left? What if I had stayed? Those words, what if, are small, but when placed side by side, they are like branches growing from a single tree trunk, each one pointing toward a different sky. Imagine an afternoon many years ago. You're standing before a decision that seemed ordinary at the time. Maybe it was choosing a career. Maybe it was moving to another place. Maybe it was calling someone you once loved. At that moment, you chose only one direction, because life forces us to choose one direction. A footstep that goes to the right cannot, at the same time, go to the left. One door opens and another door closes in silence. But years later, when you sit alone in a quiet room, the strange thing is that the closed door sometimes still appears. It does not open in the outside world, but in memory, it still has colour. In imagination, it still has sound. In the heart, it still has a vague kind of life. That is why parallel worlds are not only an idea from science fiction, they touch a very soft part of being human. They touch the feeling that our lives may have had many possible shapes before becoming the shape they have today. We do not need to immediately believe that another universe exists somewhere with a complete copy of ourselves inside it. Just by looking at how the mind works, we can already see something very close to branching. Every major memory has shadow branches around it. Every important choice pulls along a region of what did not happen, yet that region of what did not happen can sometimes still be strong enough to make the heart tremble. Neuroscience has a calmer way of talking about this. The human brain does not simply record the past like a camera. It does not store our lives as complete pieces of film and then replay them exactly as they were. Memory is often reconstructed. Each time we remember, the brain can assemble images, emotions, meanings, details, and context in a way that feels vivid, but is not completely the same as the original recording. So memory is not only an archive, it is also a scene-building workshop. And that same workshop helps us imagine the future, picture possibilities that have not arrived yet, or return to the past and think about what could have been different. Some studies call this ability episodic future thinking, and a closely related form is episodic counterfactual thinking. To put it simply, it is when we use the same raw materials of memory to build a situation that never happened. A person may remember an old job interview, then imagine that if they had answered more calmly, a career door might have opened in a different direction. A person may remember the last meal they had with their parents, then imagine that if they had stayed a little longer that day, they might have heard one more precious story. A person may remember the home of their youth, then wonder who they would have become if they had never left that place. Those scenes are not proof that another world exists out there, but they show that the human mind has a very strange ability. It can make what did not happen feel almost real in emotion. This matters because before we ask whether parallel worlds are real in the universe, we need to understand why human beings long for that question so deeply. A stone does not feel regret. A falling leaf does not wonder what would have happened if the wind had blown in another direction. But human beings do. We live through memory, through prediction, through the stories we tell ourselves about who we are. And in those stories, there is always a place for the lives we did not live. Maybe we would have been older, more peaceful, more tired, or happier if one decision had turned another way. No one knows. And because no one knows, the imagination has even more room to expand. There is an older man who still sometimes thinks about an old piano. When he was young, he once wanted to study music seriously. But then work, family, responsibility, and the long years pulled him in another direction. He does not completely regret it, because he loves his family and he loves what he has built. But sometimes, on a very quiet evening, when he hears piano music drifting over from the house next door, he does not only hear music, he hears another version of himself. Someone who might have lived in small concert halls, someone who might have failed, might have been poor, might have been lonely, but might also have touched a different kind of joy. That version of him is not standing in front of him. There is no evidence that this person exists in another universe, but in the moment when the music rises, that person feels almost real. Another woman may still remember a city she never moved to. Many years ago, she once had a chance to leave the familiar place she knew, a job far away, a small apartment overlooking a strange street, a different winter, a different life. Then she stayed, because her mother was sick, because her child was still young, because her heart was not ready. The years passed. That city became a name on a map, but it also became a symbol in her mind. Each time she hears the name of that city on the news, she does not only think of geography. She thinks of another self who might have woken up there, made coffee in another kitchen, looked out through another window, and become a slightly different person. In human emotion, parallel worlds sometimes begin like that. Not with the explosion of the cosmos, but with the very soft sigh of a possibility left behind. But if we stopped only at regret, this subject would become sad. In truth, the lives that did not happen do not only hurt us, they also help us understand the value of the life we have, because each time we imagine another branch, we also realize how fragile the present branch has been. If one meeting had never happened, we might not have loved the person we loved. If one ride had been a few minutes late, we might not have arrived at the place that changed our life. If there had been one illness, one piece of advice, one rainy season, one small decision, the whole current of life could have turned in another direction. Seen this way, the life we have now no longer feels obvious. It feels like a thread that has passed through countless tiny needle eyes to weave the person we are today. This is also what makes the question of parallel worlds feel both scientific and spiritual. Science asks, does reality have a structure that allows many possibilities to exist at the same time? Spirituality often asks in another language, are the soul, memory, intuition, and invisible connections showing us that life is deeper than it appears? These two ways of asking are not the same. One side needs evidence, measurement, and verification. The other leans toward experience, symbols, and meaning. But in the stillness of night, when we do not need to argue about who wins, these two questions can sit beside each other. They do not need to merge into one. They only need to shine light on the same thing. Human beings have always felt that reality may be larger than what the eyes can see. When someone says they feel as if they have lived another life before, we should not rush to turn that feeling into physical fact. But we also do not need to brush it away as meaningless. That feeling may come from memory, from dreaming, from unfulfilled desires, from possibilities the brain builds to help us understand ourselves. Sometimes the most mysterious thing is not a glowing portal opening in the middle of the room. The most mysterious thing is the ordinary human brain, weighing just over 2 pounds, which is a little more than 1 kilogram, and yet able to contain skies that never existed, houses never entered, conversations that never took place, and selves that never fully formed. This also explains why, when people watch a movie about the multiverse, many are not only drawn in by the visual effects, they are drawn in because that story touches their private lives. When a character meets another version of themselves, deep down, we do not only see a strange idea, we see an old question inside our own hearts. Who else could I have been? Is the person I am now the only possible result, or just one result among countless possibilities that once opened and then quietly closed? A question like that is not loud, but it stays for a long time. It follows people after the screen has gone dark. It enters sleep, dreams, and the next morning when we look at ourselves in the mirror and see a familiar face that is still full of mystery. And here, we need to keep a gentle kind of caution. Parallel worlds in science do not simply mean that everything we imagine is happening somewhere. It is not the case that every time we regret a choice, the universe instantly creates another stage where that choice can continue to live. That is an appealing way to tell the story, but it can easily distort the science. A more honest way to say it is this: the human mind can simulate lives that did not happen, while modern physics has several interpretations and hypotheses that make people question the many possible layers of reality. These two things are not the same, but they meet at one beautiful point. Both shake our feeling that there is only one simple, solid, easy to understand layer of reality. When we are young, we often think of our life as a straight line opening out in front of us. But the longer we live, the more life begins to feel like a network. There are connection points we pass through without knowing, at the time, that they mattered. A friend introduces us to a job. A rainy day makes us stop somewhere else. A mistake causes us to leave a path that seemed right. A loss makes us softer, deeper, and better able to listen. Looking back, we see that life is not only made by major decisions, but also by thousands of small collisions. If a few of those collisions had changed, the person we are today might have been different. And when we realize that, we begin to understand why the idea of branching realities is so fascinating. There is a very quiet beauty in admitting that you were once many possibilities. Before becoming the person you are now, you could have been the one who stayed, the one who left, the one who forgave, the one who stayed silent, the one who started over, the one who gave up, the one who was brave, the one who was afraid. Some of those possibilities became actions, some remained only thoughts. Some are kept in memory like the faint light of a faraway star, but all of them help shape the feeling of who you are. We are not only made by what we have done, we are also shaped by the things we could once have done but did not do. Those things create depth, create stillness, and create a gentler way of looking at ourselves. In psychology, thinking about the things that could have happened is not only a sorrowful habit, it can help human beings learn from the past. When we think, if I face a situation like that again, I will speak more clearly, the brain is using a scene that did not happen to prepare for a better future. When we think, if I had been more patient that day, maybe things would have been different. We may feel pain, but we may also grow. The worlds that didn't happen inside the mind are sometimes the secret classrooms of the soul. They do not let us turn back time, but they give us the ability to understand the time that has passed more deeply. Even so, if we stay too long in the branches we did not live, we can also become trapped. An imagined life can become too bright, making the present life look dim. A what-if can open the door to reflection, but it can also become a loop. So tonight's journey is not meant to pull us away from the reality we have. On the contrary, it helps us see this reality with wider eyes. If other worlds exist, they are still unknown. If there is only this world, then this world becomes even more precious. In both cases, the present breath is still where we truly are. This room, this body, this heartbeat, this moment, this is the branch of reality we are experiencing. When seen this way, the question, are parallel worlds real, is no longer a cold puzzle, it becomes a mirror. It reflects our curiosity about the universe, but it also reflects our tenderness toward ourselves. Maybe we want to know whether parallel worlds exist because we want to believe that nothing is ever truly lost. An unfinished love, an incomplete dream, a youth that has passed, a loved one who is no longer beside us. All of it may be leaving some kind of echo in a deeper place. Science does not allow us to state that as truth, but science gives us another gift. It shows us that reality is already far stranger than our everyday intuition. Just by looking at the brain itself, we can see that. When we lie still and do not do anything obvious, the mind is still not empty. It can drift back to the past, imagine the future, think about other people, retell the story of our life to itself, or build situations that have never existed. Scientists connect some of these activities to the brain's default mode network, a system often involved in autobiographical memory, imagination, self-reflection, and internal simulation. The name sounds dry, but the experience is very familiar. It is the moment when you wash a cup and suddenly remember an old kitchen. It is the moment when you look out the window and wonder where you will be 10 years from now. It is the moment when you hear a song and a chapter of life you thought had fallen asleep slowly returns. Inside those moments, the mind is like a small universe branching within itself, not branching in a confirmed physical sense, but branching in experience. One image leads to one memory. One memory opens one question. One question builds a life that never happened. From an empty chair, we remember someone. From an old photograph, we imagine a road. From a very faint scent, we return to a summer long gone. Nothing in the room has changed, but inside us, many scenes have appeared and then dissolved. If someone asks where the nearest parallel world is, perhaps the gentlest answer is not at the edge of the universe, but inside the mind's ability to ask, what if things had been different? Of course, this does not replace the true scientific question. The mind can imagine another world, but imagination does not mean that world exists outside the brain. A dream can feel very real, but when we wake up, we still need to distinguish between subjective experience and objective reality. An intuition can give us chills, but science needs more than chills. What is valuable is that we can hold both attitudes at the same time. We can allow ourselves to be moved by the mystery of unlived possibilities, while still being honest that emotion is not evidence. We can listen to the echoes of other roads, without turning those echoes into rushed certainty. And that balance is exactly what makes this journey deeper. If we simply say, parallel worlds are definitely real, the story becomes exciting but lacks a foundation. If we simply say, there is nothing beyond what we already know, the story becomes dry and misses the beauty of what has not yet been fully understood. The gentler path is to stand between two shores. On one side is the humility of science, on the other is the vastness of human experience. In the middle is an open question. Could reality be larger than what we are currently seeing? And if it is, then where do we human beings, with our memories, dreams and choices, belong in that larger picture? Think of an intersection at night. 4 roads stretch out in 4 directions. You take only one road, and behind you, the other 3 sink into darkness. In ordinary life, we say those 3 roads no longer belong to us. But in the mind, sometimes they remain. You can imagine the lights on the 2nd road, the sound of rain on the 3rd road, the line of trees on the 4th road. You did not walk through them, but they still have a vague kind of presence. Quantum mechanics, when it enters the story later, will ask a different kind of question, colder and more precise. At the deep level of matter, what role do possibilities have before they are measured? Are they only mathematical tools, or do they say something about the nature of reality? That question is not easy to answer, but strangely, its emotional background is not so unfamiliar to us. Because in life, we're also always facing possibility before it becomes an event. Before we say a word, there are many sentences that could be spoken. Before we sign a form, there are many futures that could open. Before we forgive or turn away, there are many versions of ourselves waiting at the threshold. Then an action happens, and the present world becomes clear. But that clarity is always born from a cloud of what could have been. Maybe that is why quantum ideas, even though they are very difficult, touch the human imagination. They make us feel that the universe is not a dead block of stone, but something richer with possibility than we imagined. Even so, we need to move slowly. Ordinary human choices cannot be used in a simple way to prove that the universe branches. When you choose tea instead of coffee, no one has the right to say for certain that a new universe immediately splits off because of that. When you turn left instead of right, we cannot rely on a feeling to claim that another copy of you is turning right somewhere. Those statements can be very captivating, but if used carelessly, they turn a profound scientific idea into an easy story. What we can say more accurately is this: both human life and modern physics make us think about the nature of possibility. One is possibility in the mind and in choice. The other is possibility in the mathematical description of the microscopic world. Both meet in the same sense of wonder. That wonder does not need to be loud. It can be very quiet. It can come when you're lying in the dark listening to the steady ticking of a clock and realizing that each passing second has chosen a shape for the world. The way light falls on the wall, the way your breath rises and falls, the way a thought appears and then dissolves, all of it is the present taking form. Countless things are not happening in this moment. You're not in another city. You're not saying another sentence. You're not living another youth. But because countless things are not happening, what is happening becomes clearer. The present is like a small candle in a room full of the shadows of possibility. Maybe that is the first lesson of the question of parallel worlds. Before it takes us to equations, it teaches us to look at this life with tenderness. We could have been so many people, but in the end, we are this person. We could have taken so many roads, but in the end, our feet are standing on this road. We could have lived so many lives in imagination, but our body is breathing in this life. And if the question of parallel worlds makes us a little sad, that sadness can also become a kind of gratitude. Gratitude that among countless possibilities, we still have a moment to listen, to reflect, to gently release old regrets, and to keep walking. On a deeper level, perhaps human beings dream of parallel worlds because we fear absolute loss. We struggle to accept that a choice that has passed is gone forever. We struggle to accept that someone who was once close to us now exists only in memory. We struggle to accept that youth, once it passes, does not return in the same form. The idea of another world therefore becomes a kind of comfort. It whispers that maybe, somewhere, what was lost has not been completely lost. Maybe somewhere, a conversation is still continuing. Maybe somewhere, a door did not close. But if that comfort wants to be honest, it must come with humility. We can let it soften the heart, but we should not force it to play the role of evidence. And perhaps we do not need another universe for those things to have meaning. A person who has passed away still lives in the way we speak, the way we love, the way we fall silent before a beautiful afternoon. A choice we did not follow still teaches us something about our truest dreams. A road we never turned onto still helps us understand why the road we are on matters. The worlds that never happened may not exist out there, but they exist as layers of meaning inside us. They keep life from feeling flat. They give the past depth, the present fragility, and the future a little light. Now, after touching the deeply human part of this question, we can go a little farther. From regret and possibility in the mind, we will step into a place smaller than dust, smaller than a cell, smaller than anything the naked eye can see. There, the world no longer behaves according to familiar intuition. A particle is not like a tiny marble resting still on a table. A state is not always like an answer that has already been chosen. And it is in that colder, stranger, deeper place that some physicists have raised an idea that gives human beings chills. Maybe reality does not erase the remaining possibilities in the way we imagine. Maybe the question, what if things had been different, does not belong only to the human heart, but also echoes very softly in the mysterious foundation of matter. From that deeply human question, science leads us to a place so small that every familiar image begins to dissolve. There is no table, no room, no clear road like the ones we know in everyday life. There is the world of atoms, electrons, photons, and quantum states so delicate that even a single act of measurement can change the story. If ordinary life is like a book open to one single page, then the quantum world is like a much stranger book, where before we read it, many lines of text may be waiting together in silence. When people hear about quantum mechanics, many often feel that it is distant, difficult to understand, almost as if it belongs inside a sealed room reserved for physicists. But in truth, what makes quantum mechanics so strange is not the hard-to-read formulas. The strangest thing is that it touches a very simple question. Before something is observed, what state is it in? In the everyday world, the answer seems obvious. A key lying on a table is lying on the table, whether we look at it or not. A leaf that falls to the ground has fallen to the ground, even if no one witnesses it. A road turns left if it turns left, and turns right if it turns right. But at the very small level of matter, that intuition is not as certain as we think. Imagine that a very tiny particle is moving through a very narrow space. If we think of it as a small marble, we may imagine that it has to pass through one specific path. But quantum mechanics gives us a different picture. Before it is measured by a specific device, the state of a quantum system can be described as a superposition of many possibilities. To say this gently, it does not mean that we are free to imagine, in some fairy tale way, that the particle is doing anything we want it to do. It means that the most accurate mathematical way to describe the quantum system before measurement often contains many possible outcomes at the same time. Only when we perform a measurement do we receive one specific result. This is like a layer of mist over a lake before dawn. Inside that mist, the far shore has not yet appeared clearly. We may know that there are many possibilities, many directions, many outcomes described in the equation. But when the light touches it, when measurement happens, we see only one particular image, a dot on a screen, a specific energy level, a measured spin direction, a clear result. And right at that moment, the great question appears: where did the remaining possibilities go? Were they never real, and only tools for calculation? Or do they have a deeper kind of existence that our senses cannot reach? This is where the story begins to feel both scientific and mysterious. Not mysterious in the sense of being vague or superstitious, but mysterious in the sense that the world is truly no longer as simple as we imagined. In everyday life, we're used to one event happening while other events do not happen. You place a cup of tea on the table and it is there. You look out the window and the sky's either dark or bright. You answer a phone call and that conversation has taken place. But at the quantum level, before a result is recorded, nature does not seem to give us such a simple picture. It gives us an equation of possibility. One famous example often used to feel this strangeness is the double-slit experiment. Imagine that we fire individual particles of light, or individual electrons, toward a barrier with two narrow slits, with a screen behind it that records where each particle lands. If particles were only like tiny marbles, we might think that each one would go through the left slit or the right slit, then leave a corresponding mark behind it. But in many versions of the experiment, when there is no device tracking the specific path of each particle, the accumulated marks on the screen gradually form an interference pattern, as if a wave had passed through both slits and interfered with itself. When we try to measure which slit the particle goes through, the interference pattern disappears and the result becomes more like particle behavior. This should not be told as a miracle. It is one of the most beautiful and uncomfortable signs that matter at the small level does not behave according to our everyday way of thinking. If we tell it more slowly, we can imagine each particle arriving at the screen like a single raindrop falling onto a dark pane of glass. Each drop makes only one small mark, but when many small marks appear, we see a pattern. That pattern does not look like a mindless group of marbles passing through two holes. It looks as if probability has woven itself into a shape. And here once again, the question of parallel worlds does not appear as a rushed claim, but as a whisper. If nature can hold many possibilities in its description, then what is a possibility really? Is it only a way of saying that we do not know? Or does it reflect something deep in the structure of reality? In the familiar explanation found in many introductory books, measurement allows us to see one result. Before measurement, the wave function describes many possible outcomes. After measurement, we receive only one specific result. But what has made physicists and philosophers think for many decades is this: what really happens during measurement? Does the wave function, meaning the mathematical description of a quantum state, truly collapse into one result? Or is that collapse only the way we update our information? What role does the measuring device play? What role does the observer play? And why does a world described by possibilities become a clear, solid experience, like the bed beneath our back, the room around us, and the breath inside our chest? Let us pause with this question for a moment, because it matters deeply. The issue is not that human consciousness creates the universe in the way many sensational stories often claim. That is much too strong an interpretation, and it is very easy to get wrong. The deeper issue is that quantum mechanics contains a very unusual philosophical gap between an equation that describes many possibilities and our experience of one single outcome. That gap is called the measurement problem. And it is this measurement problem that has opened the door to many different interpretations of quantum mechanics. Some interpretations say that when measurement happens, the quantum system moves from many possibilities into one real result. Other interpretations try to keep the equation running smoothly without requiring a mysterious collapse. And among those interpretations, there is one idea that is especially famous, especially controversial, and especially connected to tonight's question, the many worlds interpretation. This idea is associated with Hugh Everett III in 1957. Put very simply, instead of saying that the other possibilities disappear when measurement happens, the many worlds interpretation says that all possible outcomes continue to exist in different branches of reality. The observer in each branch experiences only one outcome, so from inside that branch everything still appears unique. Hearing this, the heart may slow down a little, not from fear, but because the idea is so vast. In this view, the universe is not like someone choosing one card and burning all the others. It is more like a great river reaching a field of submerged rocks and splitting into many streams. Each stream has its own current, each stream contains its own history. And the person standing in a boat on one stream sees only their own water. That person cannot hear the water of the other streams, but according to this interpretation, those streams do not necessarily disappear. Even so, we must say this very clearly and very slowly, so the story does not drift too far from science. The many worlds interpretation is not definite proof that another version of you is living another life because yesterday you chose tea instead of coffee. It is also not permission to claim that every imagined thing is happening somewhere. It is a serious interpretation within the foundations of quantum mechanics, meant to answer the question of measurement and possible outcomes. Its strength is that it tries to keep the quantum equation operating in a unified way. But its cost is a picture of reality so vast that human intuition can barely keep up with it. Perhaps we can picture it this way. You're inside a very large library. On the table there is a strange book. When you open it, you can read only one story. But at some deeper level, that book does not contain only one story. It contains many branches of the story, and each reader in each branch knows only their own page. The many worlds interpretation does not say that the book is magical. It says that if we believe the quantum equation describes the entire system, including the measuring device and the observer, then perhaps we do not need a special moment of collapse. Instead, the observer and the quantum system become connected to each other in different branches, and each branch has a consistent result. This point sounds abstract, but it matters because it keeps our story honest. Many videos can make this topic exciting by saying that every time you make a choice, the universe instantly splits in two, and another version of you follows the other path. That sentence is beautiful for the imagination, but if we say it as a proven fact, it is not correct. The more careful way to say it is this. In quantum mechanics, there is an interpretation suggesting that different quantum outcomes are all realized in branches that no longer effectively interact with one another. But carrying that idea directly into every ordinary human decision requires great caution. Science does not give us the right to say with certainty that every regret you have has its own universe living on somewhere. and it is exactly that uncertainty that makes this subject deeper. If everything had already been clearly proven, the story might become a simple lesson, but because it remains open, it becomes a door. We stand before that door with two very human hands, one hand holding the lamp of science, the other holding the tremor of the soul. The lamp of science says, "Be careful, verify, do not call the unknown a fact." The tremor within says, "But look, reality may not be as narrow as we imagined." And in that balance, we begin to understand why the question, "Are parallel worlds real?" cannot be answered too quickly. One thing that makes quantum mechanics uncomfortable for our intuition is that it does not give us a familiar image. We want to ask which slit the particle really went through, as if asking which door a person walked through. But nature sometimes answers with a probability pattern, not with an everyday story. We want to ask, where are the other possibilities? But that question may already be using the wrong language. It is like asking how heavy the colour blue is, or how many feet long a piece of music is. Not every question is completely wrong, but some questions need to be asked again in a more suitable language. So when we say a particle can exist in many possibilities at once, we should not imagine it naively as a tiny object running around along many paths. The more accurate way to say it is that a quantum state can be a superposition of different states, and from that state we can calculate the probabilities of possible outcomes when measured. This is very real in mathematics and in experiments, but it is not like the objects of everyday life. A cup is not fully on the table and fully on the floor at the same time in the ordinary sense. But a quantum system can be described by a combination of multiple states until the conditions of measurement produce a specific result in our experience. That strange feeling may remind us of life, but we should not mix the two too easily. When you are torn between two choices, that is a psychological state. When an electron is described by superposition, that is a quantum state. These two things are not the same, but they meet at one point in symbolic language. Before the world appears as something clear, there is a region of possibility. In human beings, that region is thought, imagination, prediction, fear, and hope. In physics, that region is the mathematical description of a microscopic system. Both make us feel that reality is not only something already hardened into place, but something with depth before it becomes an event. Perhaps this is why quantum mechanics is so often misunderstood. It is so fascinating that people easily turn it into an explanation for every mysterious thing, but if we do that, we lose its real beauty. Quantum mechanics does not need exaggeration in order to be wondrous. It is already wondrous enough when it shows that light has both particle-like and wave-like properties. It is already wondrous enough when it shows that individual particles can statistically create interference patterns. It is already wondrous enough when it raises the measurement problem that generations of physicists have debated. We do not need to add baseless claims to it. We only need to listen to what it truly says, and also to what it does not say. What it truly says is this. At the microscopic level, nature is described by a theory that is extremely successful, extremely precise, and yet very difficult to fit into everyday intuition. What it does not say is this. There is definitely a copy of you living in another city of reality. There is a large distance between those two statements. That distance is where honesty lives. And it is also where the imagination can walk, as long as it does not pretend it has already reached the destination. Let us place a very simple scene before us. A radioactive atom has a chance of decaying within a certain period of time. According to the quantum description, before measurement, we may have a state that includes both the possibility that it has decayed and the possibility that it has not decayed. When we check, we see one result. In the usual understanding, we say that measurement tells us the specific state. In interpretations involving collapse, there is a transition from many possibilities into one outcome. In the many worlds interpretation, the story is different. There is no fundamental collapse. Instead, the branches corresponding to different outcomes all continue, and each version of the observer recognizes only the result in their own branch. This is an idea that can make human beings fall silent, because it turns one small act of measurement into a window looking into the wider structure of reality. But let us not forget that branch here should not be understood as rooms sitting side by side inside a building where we could step through the right door and cross over. Quantum branches, if this interpretation is correct, are not worlds that are easy to contact. They are not like a secret hallway in a house. They are not places where we can send letters to ourselves on the other side. In the modern understanding, when branches lose the ability to interfere with each other because of interaction with the environment, they become experimentally separate for observers within each branch. To put it more gently, they are like songs that once shared an opening chord, then separated into melodies so distant that the listener inside one melody can no longer hear the other. This separation makes the idea both beautiful and sad. If other branches exist, we still cannot easily touch them. If other outcomes exist, we are still living in this outcome. If there is another possibility at the quantum level, we still open our eyes inside the only present we experience. And so, even within an interpretation as vast as many worlds, our life does not become cheaper. On the contrary, it may become more fragile, more precious. Because no matter how many branches reality may have, your consciousness right now knows only one current. The current moving through this breath, this room, this moment. There is one more common misunderstanding that should be set down gently. Many people hear the word observer in quantum mechanics and imagine that a human consciousness must look at the world before the world decides what happens. But in physics, observation usually has a much broader meaning. It can mean a measuring interaction, a recording device, or a process that makes information about a system become connected with the environment. It does not necessarily require human eyes staring at it. Nature does not wait for human beings to wake up before it operates. Stars, atoms, radiation, and molecules were doing their work long before anyone named them. So when we tell this story, we need to keep the mystery from turning into an exaggerated human-centered view. The real mystery lies somewhere else. The universe does not need us in order to exist, and yet it allows us to appear and wonder about it. A brain made of atoms can think about atoms. A very small consciousness under the sky can ask whether the sky is the only one. When we talk about parallel worlds, sometimes the deepest thing is not the number of universes, but the fact that a finite creature can sense the infinity of possibility. We do not stand outside reality and observe it like a god. We are a part of reality trying to understand itself. Seen from this angle, quantum mechanics does not destroy everyday life. It does not turn your cup of tea into an illusion. It does not make your memories meaningless. It only says that the foundation of the familiar world may be very different from the image built by our senses. Just as a calm lake surface can hide complex currents below, the stable world around us may be built from very strange microscopic rules. We still live in a clear world because at large scales, quantum effects are often hidden by interactions with the environment, by disturbance, by countless particles colliding and exchanging information. Everyday reality appears stable not because the quantum world disappears, but because those delicate effects are no longer easy to see in large, warm, complex objects like the room around us. This also helps us feel less afraid. The quantum world is strange, but it does not make the everyday world chaotic. You can still place your hand on your chest and feel your heartbeat. You can still hear this voice moving slowly through the night. You can still let your body soften, because at the level of our experience the bed still supports us, air still enters the lungs, and time still passes little by little. Quantum mechanics does not pull us away from that peace. It only places a deeper depth beneath that peace. As if under the familiar blanket of the world, a mathematical ocean is moving very softly. And then the question returns. If, at the smallest level, nature can be described by many possibilities, does that open the way to parallel worlds? The honest answer is this. It opens a way of thinking, but it does not settle the question. The many worlds interpretation is one of many ways to understand quantum mechanics. It has supporters, it has critics, it has strong arguments, and it also has difficult remaining questions. Modern science has not given us a photograph of other worlds. No device has pointed to a screen and said, "This is the branch where you lived another life." What we have are equations, quantum experiments, interpretations, and a deep debate about what they mean. But sometimes, a question without a final answer has its own value. It does not give us certainty, but it gives us humility. It does not give us evidence of another copy of ourselves, but it gives us the feeling that reality should not be made smaller, simply because our intuition likes simplicity. It reminds us that some things are real enough to power modern technology, yet still strange enough that the wisest minds continue to debate their deeper meaning. Quantum mechanics is not an easy lullaby. It is a lullaby from the bottom of matter, where nature speaks in probability, interference, states, and possibilities that ordinary language can only partly touch. Imagine, in the quiet of night, that the entire world around you is magnified backward into its smallest level. The pillow becomes a network of molecules. The hand becomes moving atoms. The air becomes molecules gently colliding. The dim light in the room becomes quanta of energy passing through space. Everything that seemed solid turns out to be made of empty structures and interactions. The real that we touch every day does not disappear, but it becomes deeper. And when the real becomes deeper, the question of other layers of reality no longer sounds so far away. Maybe this is the most beautiful way to continue. Do not ask quantum mechanics to act like a fortune teller, but listen to it like a strange piece of music. That music does not say that all our dreams are other universes. It does not say that every regret is saved in some distant branch. But it does say that the foundation of reality does not obey every simple image we grew up with. It says that possibility, measurement, the observer, the physical system, and the result are deeper concepts than we imagined. It says that the universe is not required to fit perfectly inside the familiar feelings of human beings, and from there, we can return to ourselves with a new softness. If the quantum world teaches anything to a tired mind, perhaps it is this. Do not be too quick to think that what you see is everything. A human life is the same. One sad day is not the whole life. One old decision is not the whole person. One loss is not the whole inner reality. Behind what has already taken shape, there are always deeper layers: memory, possibility, lessons, meaning, and spiritual roads that have not yet been named. Even if those layers are not parallel worlds in the physical sense, they still help us understand why the question of parallel worlds echoes for so long in the human heart. But now, let that question expand beyond the atom. Because if quantum physics makes us wonder about branches of possibility at the smallest level, then cosmology will lead us to a question even more immense. Maybe the issue does not lie only inside one particle, one measurement, or one microscopic state. Maybe the entire universe we call home, with hundreds of billions of galaxies in the observable region, is also only a finite bright area inside a wider reality. Maybe beyond the horizon, where light has never been able to cross over and reach us, there are regions we cannot see. Maybe our universe is not the only room, but a bubble in the vast ocean of cosmic possibilities. And if that is true, then the question, do parallel worlds exist, will no longer be only a question about quantum particles, but a question about the entire sky. If, at the smallest level of matter, reality is already strange enough to make us wonder about possibilities that have not yet appeared, then when we look up at the sky, that question does not become smaller. It grows larger. It expands from a particle smaller than an atom to the entire universe, from one very delicate act of measurement to billions of galaxies drifting in the dark. And at that scale, human beings meet another limit. Not the limit of the naked eye, but the limit of light, time, and the cosmic horizon. We often call the place we live the universe, as if it were the whole of everything that exists. But in cosmology, there is a truth that is both humble and overwhelming. The part of the universe we can observe may not be the whole of reality. It is only the part whose light has had enough time to reach us. Imagine standing in a very wide field at night, holding a small lamp in your hand. The circle of light around you is everything you can see. You can describe the ground inside that circle, the blades of grass near your feet, a few stones, and a faint line of trees at the edge of the light. But you cannot say for certain that beyond that circle there is nothing left. Maybe the field continues out there. Maybe there is a forest. Maybe there is a river. Maybe there is a land your lamp has not reached yet. The observable universe is like that. It is not necessarily the final wall of existence. It is the boundary of what light has managed to tell us. Light does not reach us instantly. It needs time to move through space. When we look at the moon, we see light that left the moon more than 1 second ago. When we look at the sun, we see light that has travelled for about 8 minutes. When telescopes look at distant galaxies, they are not only looking across distance, they are looking into the past. A galaxy billions of light years away appears to us as it once was billions of years ago. So every time human beings look deep into the sky, we are not looking at a complete present-day stage. We are looking at a history written in light, where every bright point is a letter sent from a very distant time. The universe is estimated to be about 13.8 billion years old. But that does not mean the radius of the observable universe is only 13.8 billion light years. Because space has been expanding while light has been travelling, regions that emitted light very early may now be much farther away than the age of the universe expressed in light years. This way of speaking can make us feel a little dizzy, but let us think of it gently. Light left a very distant place when the universe was young, and while that light was travelling toward us, the fabric of space itself kept expanding. So what we see is not only a distant object, but the trace of a universe that has changed throughout the journey of that light. And then a gentle but very deep question appears. If we can see only a finite region, then what lies beyond that region? Maybe it is simply more galaxies, more empty space, more structures similar to the parts we already know. But in some cosmological models, the answer may become stranger. Maybe our observable universe is only one region inside a larger structure. Maybe there are realms that will never send light to us, not because they do not exist, but because distance and the expansion of space have placed them forever beyond our view. In that case, not seen no longer means not there. It only means nature has placed a veil too vast between us and the rest. This is where the idea of the multiverse in cosmology begins to resonate. Unlike the many worlds interpretation in quantum mechanics, the multiverse in cosmology usually speaks about the possibility of many cosmic regions, many areas of space-time, or many bubble universes born within a larger background. The image of a bubble is not proof, it is a way of imagining. We can picture an immense sea of mist, where small bubbles form, expand, and inside each bubble there may be a history of its own. One bubble may contain galaxies, stars, planets, and physical laws that are similar to ours or different from ours. Another bubble may forever remain unreachable to us, like a dream lying on the other side of expansion. This idea is often connected to cosmic inflation, a hypothesis suggesting that in an extremely early period, the universe went through a phase of incredibly rapid expansion. Cosmic inflation was not created to tell mystical stories, but to explain certain large-scale features of the universe, such as why the observable universe looks fairly uniform in directions that are extremely far apart. In some versions of inflation, that process may not end everywhere at the same time. One region may stop inflating and become a universe like our region. Another region may continue inflating. Then, from that wider background, new regions may form like bubbles. If this image is correct, our universe may not be the entire ocean, but a bright bubble within that ocean. Let that image drift slowly for a moment. A bright bubble. Inside it is everything we know. The night sky, the Milky Way, the sun, Earth, oceans, forests, cities, quiet rooms, dreams, the people who have loved us, and the questions we carry from youth until our hair turns grey. All of that history, all of that familiarity, may exist only inside one region of a wider reality. Not because it is small in the sense of being worthless, but because the background that contains it may be unimaginably vast. When we think this way, life does not lose its meaning. On the contrary, it feels more fragile, more precious, like a candle burning inside a dark cathedral so vast that no one can see the whole ceiling. But we need to move very slowly, because this is an area that can easily be overstated. No one has directly observed another bubble universe. No telescope has captured an image of a universe outside our own. When cosmologists talk about the multiverse, they are often talking about possible consequences of certain theoretical models, not a fact that has been placed on the table like a stone. This is the difference between serious science and sensational storytelling. Science can ask very bold questions, but it must hold on to humility. It can imagine a cosmic ocean, but it still has to admit that we're standing inside a very limited bubble of observation. Even though it remains debated, the idea of the multiverse is fascinating, because it touches an ancient question. Why does our universe have conditions that allow life to appear? The forces of nature, the physical constants, the rate of expansion, the amount of matter, the formation of stars and elements, all of these seem to have to fall within certain limits for galaxies to exist, for stable stars to exist, for carbon to exist, for complex chemistry to exist. and eventually for living beings to appear and ask who they are. If some basic values were very different, the universe might not form long-lived stars, or matter might not combine in familiar ways, or life as we know it might have no foundation from which to emerge. This does not prove the multiverse, but it makes people ask, if there are many universes with different conditions, then the fact that at least one universe is suitable for life may not seem so strange. We see this universe as suitable because only in a suitable region could observers like us appear and ask the question. That line of reasoning is often called thinking through the anthropic principle, meaning we have to take into account the conditions required for the observer to exist when explaining why we see the universe as it is. But this principle also needs to be used very carefully. If used too strongly, it can become a way of explaining everything without requiring verification. If used humbly, it reminds us that the position of human beings in the universe is not completely neutral. We are not observing from outside everything. We are observing from inside a region with conditions that allow us to exist. In other words, the universe we see is not only the place where we live. It is also a place that has been gentle enough in certain physical ways to allow eyes, brains, and consciousness to appear. There is a very quiet beauty in this. Imagine an instrument with millions of ways to tune it. Most ways of tuning it might create sounds that are too sharp, too muddy, too tense, or not musical at all. But in certain very special tunings, the sound can resonate, harmonize, and become rich enough for a song to appear. Our universe, in that image, is like an instrument tuned in a way that allows stars to burn, planets to cool, water to exist, carbon to connect, cells to appear, and eventually a human being to lie in the night listening to a story about that very instrument. If there is only one instrument, the question is why it was tuned this way. If there are countless instruments, the question becomes, are we inside one of the rare instruments that can play the music of life? But right here, the debate begins. Some people see the multiverse as a powerful direction of thought because it may expand the explanatory framework for the seemingly special conditions of the universe. Others object that if other universes cannot be observed, cannot be tested, and cannot produce clear predictions, then the idea risks moving away from experimental science and becoming philosophy or speculation. This is not a small disagreement. It touches the very question, what is science? How directly testable does a theory need to be? Can a consequence of a model be considered serious if that consequence itself cannot be reached? And should we accept a very large picture if it helps explain part of the observable universe, even while the rest remains beyond our grasp? That question is like standing before a very high wall at night. On this side, we have measurements, cosmic microwave background radiation, the distribution of galaxies, the expansion of space, and delicate data from telescopes and satellites. On the other side, we have regions that may exist but send no signal to us. If the wall is too high, do we have the right to speak about the other side? Perhaps we have the right to ask the question, if that question grows out of models that have been built seriously. But we do not yet have the right to turn the answer into certainty. This is the thin boundary between scientific imagination and a claim without enough evidence. So when we speak about the multiverse, the most fitting voice should not be the voice of someone declaring that they know everything. It should be the voice of someone standing by the sea at night, listening to the waves, holding an unfinished map. We know the ocean is real because the water is touching our feet. We know there are currents because boats have crossed them. We know the sky is full of stars because the light is arriving. But what about the islands far away? They may exist, they may not. There may be some indirect sign inside a model. There may never be a way to confirm it. That honesty does not make the story less fascinating. It makes the story deeper because it allows us to be amazed without needing to deceive ourselves. Another thing that makes the multiverse in cosmology different from the image we often see in movies is that it does not necessarily contain a nearly identical copy of you. When movies talk about parallel worlds, they often give us other Earths, other cities, and similar people who made different choices. Cosmology is much more cautious. Another universe, if it exists in bubble models, could be so different that it has no atoms as we know them, no stars, no chemistry, and no time flowing in a familiar way. It may not be another stage for your life. It may be a physical realm so alien that the word life no longer has meaning. And even if there are regions more similar to our universe, We still have no evidence to say that there is another Earth there, much less another version of you. This point is very important for the message of this journey. Parallel worlds have not been proven as places that definitely contain other lives of ours. But the question still has value because it forces us to recognize that reality may have many layers. The layer of personal experience, the layer of the brain imagining possibilities, the quantum layer with difficult to understand outcomes, and the cosmological layer with regions that may lie beyond the observable horizon. Each layer does not simply prove the other, but when placed beside one another, they create a very strong feeling. What we call reality should perhaps not be reduced to only what we can touch with our hands. Think of the observable universe as a room with a window. We have equipped that room with wonderful telescopes. We have seen the ancient light of the early universe. We have measured the expansion of space. We have learned that the sky is not still in the way ancient people once imagined. We have learned that galaxies are giant islands of stars, and that the Milky Way is only one among countless such islands. But the window still has a frame. No matter how clear the glass is, it still looks outward within a limit. Beyond the frame, there may be far, far more. And that very frame reminds human beings that understanding is not only knowing something, but also knowing what we have not yet seen. There is a very strange feeling when we think that cosmic microwave background radiation, the ancient light left over from the time when the universe became cool enough for light to travel freely, is one of the farthest images of the past that we can directly observe. It is like a glowing wall of mist from when the universe was still very young. Before that wall, light did not travel freely in the way that allows us to see as we see galaxies. So even when we turn telescopes in every direction, we still see a boundary of information. That boundary is not necessarily the end of existence. It is only the place where our story told by light begins to fade. This makes the question of parallel worlds both vast and humble. We are not only asking, is there another world like my life? We are also asking, how limited is my knowledge? Could what I call the whole be only a part? And if the rest remains forever beyond observation, how should I live with that unknown? Some people may feel uneasy, some may feel lonely, but others may feel a kind of peace. Because not knowing everything does not mean meaninglessness. Not seeing everything does not mean the darkness is empty. Sometimes it is our very limit that gives wonder room to breathe. On a very quiet night, imagine yourself looking up at the sky. The stars you see are only very nearby points on the cosmic scale. Farther away are galaxies the naked eye cannot see. Farther still are lights that have taken billions of years to reach telescopes. Farther still is the observable horizon, where not everything ends, but where information can no longer reach us in the familiar way. And farther still, if some models are correct, there may be regions of space that have never touched our history and never will. When we think this way, we suddenly feel that we are not only lying in a room, we are lying inside a cosmic question. What is worth noticing is that science does not tell us to fear that question. Science also does not tell us to immediately believe every beautiful answer. Science teaches us a way to move, measure what can be measured, test what can be tested, separate what is known from what is still speculation. But do not close the door on big ideas if they arise from serious theory. And the gentler spiritual part of human beings teaches us a way to remain. When we do not know everything, we can be humble. When we see that we are small, we can be grateful. When we face immensity, we can breathe slowly, without needing to turn every mystery into an answer right away. Maybe that is why stories about the multiverse can hold the mind for so long. They do not only make us curious about physics, they make us think about our place in everything. If our universe is only one among many regions, then what is the self? If physical conditions can be different elsewhere, then how fragile is life here? If light has limits, then how much wider can truth be than our experience? And if reality truly has more than one layer, is the version we are living the whole story, or only the chapter this consciousness is able to read? At this point, something very strange begins to appear. Whether we move from human memory, quantum particles, or the vast universe, the question still returns to the same place. If reality has more than one layer, then is the version we're living the only version of ourselves? That question is no longer simple curiosity. It becomes a very small needle touching the fabric of the self. Because if there are other universes, if there are other regions, if there are other branches, then we will want to know, is there someone like me somewhere? someone with a similar face, almost similar memories, another sadness, another joy? And if there is not, why does the very thought still make the human heart tremble? Cosmology does not answer that personal question directly. It does not say there is a copy of you out there. It also does not say that could never be possible. It only opens a wider context where the observable universe is not necessarily everything. In an infinite universe, or in a multiverse diverse enough, some people have reasoned that repeated configurations of matter could exist. But this is an extremely speculative area, depending on very large assumptions about the size, properties, probabilities, and laws of all reality. So the most honest way is not to turn it into a promise. If another version of us exists, science has not yet placed that person in our hands. If not, the question still has not lost its beauty. Because sometimes the value of a question does not lie in giving us another person out there, but in helping us understand more deeply the person who is here. Let us return to the image of the circle of light around the candle. Inside that circle is your life. What is known, what has been chosen, what has been lost, what remains. Beyond that circle are cosmic possibilities we cannot yet verify, realms farther than light, bubble models, constants that may be different, and questions without conclusions. If we stare too long into the darkness, we may be pulled away. But if we look in the right way, that darkness does not pull us out of life. It makes the circle of light more precious. Because right here, in the part of reality we are truly experiencing, a miracle has happened. The universe is complex enough to create consciousness, and consciousness is deep enough to wonder about the universe. This is a very important point in keeping the story from becoming cold. The multiverse, if it exists, does not make this life lose its value. An ocean does not make a drop of water meaningless. A library does not make one page useless. A sky full of stars does not make the lamp inside the house less warm. If reality is wider, this life is still the place where you love, remember, forgive, learn, grow old, and sleep under the gentle light of night. If reality contains only this one universe, then this life becomes even rarer. In both cases, the greatest question is not only how many universes there are, but whether we can live more deeply inside the universe that is allowing us to be here. But there is still another reason human beings cannot take their eyes away from the idea of bubble universes. It gives us a sacred image without needing to break science. Each bubble, if it exists, could be a closed story. A place that may have its own time, its own matter, its own fate. A place that is born, grows, cools, and may die away or continue expanding. That image is somewhat similar to spiritual traditions that have spoken of many realms, many levels, many layers of existence. But similarity in image does not mean the two are the same. Science speaks through models, equations, and data. Spirituality speaks through symbols, experience, and meaning. When placed gently beside each other, they do not need to compete. They simply suggest the same feeling. Reality may be deeper than the room built by our senses. And so, when we speak about the multiverse in a voice meant for sleep, what we need to keep is not excitement, but a cautious sense of wonder. We do not need to say that outside the universe there are definitely copies walking around. We do not need to say that scientists have proven there are doors to other worlds. We only need to say that modern cosmology itself, with the expansion of space, with the observable horizon, with the hypothesis of inflation, with questions about the physical conditions required for life, has made human beings expand the imagination towards structures larger than the observable universe. And inside that opening, the question of parallel worlds continues to live, not as a certain answer, but as a lamp placed at the edge of the unknown. A person lying down and listening at this point may not remember every term. That is all right. What should remain is the image. We're inside a bright region of information, not necessarily at the center of everything. There is a horizon, not because the universe ends there, but because light and time set limits on what we can know. There are models that speak of other regions, but they still require caution. There is a fascination in that idea, because it may help us think about the delicacy of the conditions that allow life. And there is a deep debate, because science cannot rely only on the beauty of an idea. It needs traces, predictions, verification, or at least a strong connection to what has already been observed. So when someone asks, is the multiverse real? The gentlest answer may be, we do not know yet. But that we do not know yet is not empty. It contains a whole century of physics, telescopes looking into the childhood of the universe, equations about expansion, debates about inflation, reflections on physical constants, and very quiet nights when human beings look up at the sky and feel both small and invited. We do not know yet is not the end. It is a way of standing before the sky without lying. And from that sky, our journey will continue deeper into another idea. If there are regions of the universe that cannot be seen because they lie beyond the observable horizon, then could there be realities that are not far away in distance, but far away along another dimension? Could there be layers of space that our senses were not born to perceive? Could there be hidden dimensions, structures lying right beside us and yet still untouchable, like a creature living on a sheet of paper that cannot understand the height above it? From the ocean of bubble universes, the question will slowly draw inward into an image that is very close and very strange. What if another world does not have to be far away, but is right beside us, only shifted from us along a dimension we do not know how to see? If there are cosmic regions beyond the observable horizon, then the next question becomes even stranger. Could there be realities that are not truly far away in terms of distance, but so close that they almost touch us, only shifted away from us, along a dimension our senses do not know how to perceive? When we say far, we usually think of a long road, of light travelling millions or billions of years, of galaxies like silver dust against the black sky. But theoretical physics has raised another kind of far. Not far forward, backward, left, right, above, or below, but far along a direction that our three-dimensional minds can almost never fully imagine. In everyday life, we're used to three dimensions of space. A room has length, width, and height. A table has a flat surface spreading outward and legs going downward. A hand can move forward, move back, rise, lower, open to the left, or open to the right. Our bodies were born into that world, so three dimensions feel so natural that we do not even need to think about them. Then time moves like a separate current, carrying everything from morning to night, from yesterday to today, from youth to old age. But because we are so familiar with this structure, we easily mistake what we can perceive for the entire structure of space and reality. Imagine a very small creature living on a flat sheet of paper. To that creature, the world has only two main directions, forward and backward, left and right. It can draw the map of its entire life on that sheet of paper. It can build a house, visit neighbours, measure distances, and tell stories about faraway lands. But if a hand from above lifted it off the paper, that creature would not know what to call the experience. It has no concept of above, in the sense that we understand it. It may feel as if it has just disappeared from the world, then appeared somewhere else. To it, that would seem like magic. To us, it is simply movement through height. That image is not proof that hidden dimensions exist. It is only a bridge for the imagination. It helps us understand that if perception is limited by the number of dimensions we can sense, then a higher dimensional reality, if it exists, could be very close and still almost invisible. A creature on a sheet of paper does not need to travel very far to meet the third dimension. The third dimension is right there, passing through every point of the paper. But it has no senses, no body, and no everyday mathematics that would allow it to step into that dimension. And perhaps, if our space has deeper dimensions, they may not lie at the end of a long journey. They may lie inside the structure of the very place where we are sitting, only quieter than anything we have ever known. In the history of physics, the idea of extra-spatial dimensions has not been only a beautiful fantasy. Since the early 20th century, some scientists have asked whether different forces of nature could be understood as expressions of geometry in a space with more dimensions. Theodore Kaluza and Oscar Klein once proposed a very bold way of seeing things. If one small curled-up spatial dimension were added, some features of electromagnetism might emerge from geometry, just as in general relativity, gravity is understood through the shape of space-time. That idea did not become the final answer to everything, but it opened a door. Perhaps what we call forces, particles, and laws are sometimes shadows of a deeper geometric structure. Think of a very long water pipe seen from far away. If you stand far enough, it looks like only a thin line. A tiny ant crawling on the pipe can move along its length, but it can also move around the circumference of the pipe. To the person standing far away, that circular direction is too small to see, so the pipe appears to have only one length. But for a creature small enough, the circular direction is real. This image is often used to explain the idea of curled-up dimensions. A dimension may exist, but be so small that our large-scale experience does not notice it. If this is true at a very deep level, space may be like a fabric that seems flat, but when seen at an extremely tiny scale, it has folds, loops, and geometric paths that the senses cannot enter. In string theory, the idea of extra dimensions becomes even more prominent. String theory does not view fundamental particles as dimensionless points, but imagines them as extremely tiny strings that can vibrate in many ways. Different patterns of vibration are connected with different kinds of particles. But for the mathematics of some versions of string theory to be consistent, space cannot have only 3 dimensions as ordinary experience suggests. Some versions require more dimensions, often described as having extra small dimensions that are curled up, or in some broader frameworks as involving 11 dimensions. This does not mean we have proven that the universe truly has those dimensions. String theory remains a large, deep, beautiful theoretical structure, but it has not been directly confirmed by observation in a way that would make it the final description of nature. But even though it has not been proven, the idea still makes people fall silent, because it suggests that what we call space may only be the visible part of a more complex structure. It is like looking at a carpet from far away and seeing only its overall colour, but when we move closer, we see every woven thread, every knot, every small path of the material. The 3 familiar dimensions may be the smooth outer surface of the carpet. Hidden dimensions, if they exist, may be the weaving inside, shaping how the strings vibrate, how particles have mass, charge and properties, and how nature appears like music with rules. At this point, the story begins to touch the image of a membrane, or brain. In theoretical physics, a brain is an object extended across one or more spatial dimensions. A point can be seen as a 0-dimensional object. A string is a 1-dimensional object. A membrane is a 2-dimensional object. And mathematically, people can speak of brains with higher dimensions. In some models, the universe we experience can be imagined as a brain with 3 spatial dimensions lying inside a higher dimensional space. To say this gently, it is as if our entire familiar world, every house, every mountain, every star, every cell, every whisper in the night, all takes place on a vast surface, while outside that surface there may be deeper directions that ordinary matter cannot freely enter. This image is both beautiful and a little chilling. Because if it is true in some sense, another reality does not necessarily have to be billions of light years away. It could be beside us along another dimension. Not beside us like a chair beside a table, but beside us the way height is beside a creature on a sheet of paper, infinitely close but untouchable, sharing a deep foundation of space, but not opening a path for the ordinary hand. If there is another brain parallel to ours in a higher dimensional space, it may be like another page placed very close to our page, while every 2-dimensional creature on each page does not know the other page is there, because they have no way to leave the surface of their own paper. Of course, this is still a theoretical model. We should not say that there is a universe right next to the wall of your bedroom, and that you only need to meditate deeply enough to step into it. That kind of statement sounds appealing, but it goes far beyond science. The more careful way to say it is this. Some theories in physics have considered the possibility that extra spatial dimensions and brains may play a role in the underlying structure of nature. Some brain world models imagine that matter or forces may be confined to a brain, while gravity may be connected with a higher dimensional space. These ideas open new possibilities for thinking about the universe, but they are not proof that ordinary worlds are sitting beside us like secret rooms. This distinction is very important. True mystery does not mean taking a scientific term and turning it into a certain spiritual claim. True mystery means standing before the unknown with respect. We can say that human beings in many spiritual traditions have felt reality as if it has many levels, many realms, many deeper layers. We can also say that theoretical physics, in a completely different language, has considered the possibility that space may have more dimensions than ordinary experience suggests. But we should not rush to merge these two things into one. One side is experience, symbol, belief, and contemplation. The other side is mathematics, models, experiments, and verification. When we let them stand gently beside each other, we gain depth. When we force them to become the same thing, we easily distort both science and spirituality. So if hidden dimensions exist, why do we not see them? There are several possible answers in different models. One possibility is that those dimensions are too small, curled up at an extremely tiny scale, so tiny that current tools cannot directly observe them. Another possibility in brain models is that the familiar particles and forces of our world are confined to the brain, like drops of water that can only move across the surface of a glass pane and cannot freely leave that surface. In that case, we do not see the extra dimension not because it does not exist, but because the very matter that makes up our eyes, hands, brains, and instruments is also bound inside the familiar structure. We are using a three-dimensional body to search for a direction that the body is not allowed to travel. This can be illustrated by a train running on a track. The train can move very far forward or backward, but it cannot freely fly into the sky just because the sky is right above it. It is not that the sky does not exist. It is simply that the structure of the train and the track limits the kind of motion it can make. If familiar matter particles are also attached to a brain in some way within a theoretical model, then the existence of another dimension does not automatically mean we can step into it. Reality may be wider than our ability to move through it, just as the sea is wider than the path of a boat being held inside one current. But gravity makes the story even stranger. Some models have suggested that gravity may spread into extra dimensions differently from the other forces. This has been studied partly because gravity is far weaker than the other fundamental forces at microscopic scales. Not every model is correct, and there is no final conclusion. But the idea gives us a beautiful image. Perhaps something in the silent attraction between objects, in the way Earth holds the moon, in the way galaxies hold their stars, is hinting at a deeper geometry of space. Gravity has always been the force that makes human beings feel as if the universe has its own soul, because it is not loud, it does not flash, it does not require direct contact, and yet it quietly connects everything with everything. If it also has some connection to deeper dimensions, then its silence becomes even more worth contemplating. Even so, we must keep our feet on the ground. Hidden dimensions and brains are not an escape route for explaining every strange experience in life. A vivid dream does not need to be a journey into another dimension. A strong intuition does not need to be a signal from a nearby brain. A feeling of déjà vu does not need to be a memory leaking from a parallel universe. Those things may have neurological, psychological, memory-based, and emotional explanations. If we assign every vague experience to another dimension, we take away the value of vagueness itself. Sometimes the most beautiful mystery is not found in answering too quickly, but in allowing many possibilities to be heard without rushing to turn them into truth. Imagine standing in a dark room with your hand against a wall. You know there may be another room on the other side, but without a door, without sound, without light passing through, you cannot say for certain what is happening there. The wall does not prove the room beyond it. It only makes you aware of your limit. Hidden dimensions, if they exist, are like that. They are possibilities raised by certain physical models, not tickets that allow us to speak with certainty about people, souls, or lives existing beside us. But that very possibility shifts the question of parallel worlds from somewhere very far beyond the sky to perhaps reality has directions that we were not born to see. This touches a very deep human feeling, the feeling that the familiar world is sometimes too thin. There are evenings when an ordinary room suddenly seems to contain more than it is showing. The light on the wall, the wind outside the door, a memory passing briefly through the mind, all of it makes us feel as if there is another layer of presence behind the surface of everyday life. Science cannot take that feeling as evidence. But that feeling helps us understand why human beings are so easily drawn to the idea of hidden dimensions. It gives language to an old intuition. Perhaps reality is not only flat, clear, and simple. Perhaps it has depth that we sometimes feel through intuition, while science tries to approach it through mathematics. Here, we find a very subtle meeting point between science and spirituality. Spirituality often speaks through images of heavenly levels, realms, layers of vibration, and thin veils between worlds. Science does not use those words as proof. Science speaks of higher dimensional space, compactification, brains, fields, forces, energy scales, and indirect observation. The two languages are different, like two rivers, but both flow around one shared mountain, the suspicion that everyday reality is not the whole. What matters is not confusing one map with the other. If we keep our caution, we can let the two languages illuminate each other without making them lose their nature. A very concrete example can help us feel this. Imagine an old radio sitting in a room. The air around it seems empty. But when you turn the tuning knob, voices, music, and sounds begin to appear. It is not that the sound was created from nothing at that exact moment. The waves were already present in space, but the device had to be tuned in the right way to receive them. This image does not prove that parallel worlds are broadcasting around us. But it shows something familiar. There are things that are real but cannot be seen directly by the senses until we have the right tool. Magnetic fields, radio waves, infrared light, ultraviolet light, neutrinos, and gravitational waves have all reminded human beings that the world does not stop at the eyes, ears, and skin. So when physics asks about hidden dimensions, it continues a very long tradition of science, expanding reality beyond the first feeling of the senses. However, the difference lies in the level of evidence. Radio waves can be measured, infrared light can be detected, gravitational waves have been observed with extremely sensitive instruments. Extra spatial dimensions and brains in most current models still do not have clear direct evidence. That is why we can use them as windows for reflection, but not yet as a solid floor. In an honest telling, we have to say clearly, this is an area of theoretical physics, very serious but still open. And that openness is exactly what fits tonight's voice. We are not here to nail reality down with a rushed answer. We are here to walk slowly around the edge of the unknown. When we think about hidden dimensions, the question of parallel worlds also changes its tone. Earlier, we imagined quantum branches as rivers splitting apart. Then we imagined bubble universes as bright foam in the ocean of inflation. Now, we imagine another possibility. Realities may not be separated only by distance or history, but by dimensional structure. A world may be very close in a way ordinary space cannot measure. It is like two pages pressed tightly together, while the character printed on one page knows only the two directions on the surface of that paper. The other page is separated by only a thin layer, but to that character, that distance belongs to a kind of space it cannot imagine. Nearness becomes a kind of distance. This image carries a beautiful sadness, because it resembles the way human beings sometimes live beside one another and still cannot touch each other. Two people may sit in the same room, but each carries a private inner world. One person remembers the past, another worries about the future. One person hears rain as comfort, another hears rain as loss. They are not far apart in space, but they are separated by the deep dimensions of memory, emotion, language, and experience. This is not physics, but it helps the heart understand something. Being close does not always mean being able to meet. And if physics has ever raised the idea of realities that are near but cannot touch, the human soul may have understood that feeling for a very long time. But once again, every emotional example must return to the main message. These examples do not prove parallel worlds. They only help us feel why the idea has such resonance. Parallel worlds do not yet have direct evidence that allows us to affirm them. Hidden dimensions are not discovered passageways. Brains are not bridges to another life. But these ideas tell us that reality may be wider and deeper than the simple model built by the senses. And that is exactly what makes tonight's question worth staying with. If what we see is only the surface of space, how much may be lying still beneath that surface? Maybe someday, high-energy experiments, cosmological observations, or discoveries we cannot yet imagine will give us clearer clues about extra dimensions. Maybe some current models will be replaced by deeper theories. Maybe the idea of brains will become only one stage in the history of physics search. Science is always like that. It is not a building standing still, but a structure being repaired in dim light. Old stairways may be removed, new windows may open, but every serious idea, whether it later turns out to be right or wrong, can help human beings learn to ask better questions. And perhaps asking better questions is also a form of awakening. Instead of asking, is there a portal where I can step into another life? we can ask, why do I always feel that this life is not the whole? Instead of asking, does some soul drift through another dimension? As if it were a certain claim, we can ask, why have human beings in every age used images of many-layered reality to speak about what is deepest? Instead of asking, has science proven? Parallel worlds? We can ask, which models have made scientists seriously consider the possibility that reality has a structure beyond intuition? These questions do not take away the mystery. They make the mystery more mature. If you are listening in the night, try imagining that the space around you is not only emptiness, it is a structure. It can curve according to relativity. It can tremble at the quantum level. It can expand on the cosmic scale. And in some theories, it may have dimensions smaller or deeper than everyday experience. The quiet room is no longer an empty box. It becomes a tiny point inside a structure so large that no imagination can fully hold it. The wall is still the wall. The floor is still the floor. But behind that ordinary reality, we feel a very distant, very low background music, as if space itself is holding a secret it has not fully spoken. What is comforting is that we do not need to understand that secret completely in order to rest. No one needs to fully grasp 10 dimensions, 11 dimensions, brains, strings, compactification, or advanced geometry in order to feel the stillness of the question. We only need to hold one simple image. Perhaps there are directions the eyes cannot see, just as height is invisible to a creature living on a sheet of paper. Perhaps there are structures our bodies cannot enter, just as a train cannot leave its track. Perhaps there are models that make scientists ask whether the familiar universe is only one layer within a deeper space. And even without a final answer, that question itself has made the picture of reality wider, softer, and stranger. From here, the story naturally returns to human beings. Because even when we speak about hidden dimensions or brains, what moves us most is not distant mathematics, but the possibility that there may be another version of ourselves. If there are realities lying right beside us but unable to touch, if there are branches that cannot hear one another, if there are regions beyond the reach of light, then we ask again, is there another life of ours somewhere? A self who entered another door? A self who said different words? A self who held on to what we lost? Science has not allowed us to affirm this. But science, through its questions, has opened a space wide enough for us to look more deeply into ourselves. And perhaps even if there is no other person living in our place inside a hidden dimension, the versions of ourselves that never fully became real are still lying within memory, within choice, within the self, like small stars that no longer shine in the sky, but still glow inside the heart. If hidden dimensions and hypothetical universes expand the mind, then there is one image that reaches even deeper than all the rest. The image of another version of yourself, not a distant star, not a cold cosmic bubble beyond the reach of light, not an equation written on a blackboard, but a person with a face almost like yours, eyes almost like yours, perhaps carrying a few similar early memories inside them, but who then turned in another direction. That person may have said the words you once left unspoken. That person may have walked away when you stayed. That person may have stayed when you left. And it is this image that makes the question of parallel worlds feel no longer distant. It walks straight into the most private room inside each person, the room of choice, memory, regret, and identity. When we talk about parallel worlds, what moves us most may not be how many more galaxies there are, or how many universes lie beyond the reach of light. What makes us fall silent is the possibility that somewhere, inside a structure of reality we cannot yet touch, there may be a life that resembles the shadow of our own, a life that began at almost the same point, but then slowly drifted away. A person who chose the job we rejected, a person who made the phone call we never made, a person who was brave enough to begin again at an age when we once thought it was too late, a person who held on to the love we let go. That image is powerful because it does not only ask about the universe, it asks about us. Is the person I am now the only possible result, or just one of the possibilities that once could have taken shape? There is a truth that is very gentle, but also very painful. A human life is not only made of what happened, it is also surrounded by what did not happen. We grow up inside one stream of events, but around that stream, There are always other currents we never entered. One person could once have become a doctor, but instead became someone who tends the small garden behind the house. One person once wanted to write books, but spent most of their life taking care of family. One person once planned to leave a marriage that was no longer happy, but then, because of children, fear and compassion, stayed for many more years. One person once held an application to study somewhere very far away, then folded it, placed it in a drawer, and chose a safer life. Those decisions are not always simply right or wrong, they're only crossroads. But every crossroad leaves behind a shadow of the road not taken. Some of those shadows do not hurt, they appear only like a soft breeze. For example, one afternoon, you see someone doing the work you once dreamed of doing. You're not jealous, you do not feel clear regret. But inside there is a very small sound, like a glass gently touching the surface of a table. You wonder, if I had been more persistent back then, who might I have become? Maybe you would still have been tired, maybe you would still have been disappointed, maybe that other road would not have been as beautiful as your imagination made it seem. But the mere fact that it was once a possibility is enough to give it a life of its own in memory. And sometimes, a parallel world does not need to appear through blue light or a portal in space. It appears through a very small question inside the heart. Could it be that somewhere, the unlived part of me is still walking on? Science cannot confirm that this part is living in another universe. So far, we have no direct evidence that an ordinary copy of you exists in a parallel world, waking up in another house using another name, or growing older through another history. This needs to be said clearly, because otherwise the story can easily slide away from honesty. Interpretations in quantum mechanics, hypotheses in cosmology, and ideas about hidden dimensions all open deep ways of thinking about reality, but they do not give us certain evidence that every personal choice has a copy continuing to live somewhere else. The appeal of an idea is not evidence for that idea. But the strange thing is that even when science has not proven another version out there, other versions still exist inside the mind in a way that is emotionally very real. The human brain does not only remember, it simulates, it reconstructs the past, imagines the future, places itself onto roads never taken, and sometimes creates scenes of lives that never happened but still carry weight. When we think, if I had said something different back then, the brain does not only create a sentence, it can build an entire room, a face, a reaction, and a chain of days that might have followed. When we think, if I had never left that place, the mind can rebuild a house, a routine, and another old age. These things are not the physics of parallel worlds, but they are the psychology of parallel possibilities in a human life. A person who worked for many years in a quiet office may still remember the time he almost opened a small restaurant. Back then, he had looked for a location, written down a few recipes, and imagined the smell of warm bread in the morning. Then a family debt, a child who needed tuition money, and a nameless worry made him set that dream down. Many years later, he walks past a small restaurant with yellow lights, hears the sound of a spoon touching a glass, smells freshly brewed coffee, and for a few seconds he does not only see a restaurant, he sees a life he never lived. He sees himself behind the counter wiping a wooden table, greeting a regular customer, tired but happy in a different way. That version does not need to exist in another universe in order to move him. It is already real enough in the moment where memory and imagination meet. Another person may have loved deeply but never said it out loud. Not because the love was small, but because the timing was wrong, because of honor, because of distance, because of fear of breaking something that had already become stable. Then life moved on. The other person had a life of their own. Everything seemed to have fallen asleep. But many years later, just one old song, one accidental photograph, one familiar street in an old city, and that entire life that never happened suddenly appears. What if I had told the truth back then? What if that person had also been waiting for one word? If the two of us had walked together, what would the house have been like? What would the mornings have been like? How would the seasons of illness, joy, arguments, and forgiveness have passed? A question like that is not proof of the multiverse, but it shows that inside the human heart, unlived lives can still have their own heartbeat. This does not make the present life false. On the contrary, it makes the present life deeper, because we realize that who we are is not a simple stone. We are the result of many choices, many circumstances, many things we dared to do and did not dare to do, much luck and much loss. Our identity is not made by a single straight line. It is like a great tree, with branches that grew into the light and branches that exist only as sleeping buds beneath the bark. Those sleeping branches did not become real limbs, but they still belong to the history of the tree. The unlived versions of us are the same. They do not necessarily exist somewhere out in the universe, but they still belong to the depth of who we are. Researchers who study autobiographical memory often say that personal memory does not only help us remember what we did, it also helps us maintain the feeling of who we are across time. We tell the story of our life to ourselves. I was once that child, I went through that event, I loved, I failed, I learned, I lost, and I became this person. But a life story is never made only of events. It is also made of the way we explain those events. A failure can be told as proof that we are useless, or as a turning point that helped us grow. A breakup can be told as a wound, or as a door leading toward another kind of peace. A decision not to follow a dream can be told as giving up, or as an act of love for someone else. Identity does not live only in what happens, but also in the meaning we place on what happens. And here, the question of another version of ourselves becomes special. When we imagine a self who chose differently, we are trying to write another life story. We are not only asking which events would have changed, we are asking, guess, who would I have become? If I had accepted that job transfer, would I have become braver? If I had left that relationship sooner, would my heart have become lighter? If I had stayed longer to care for my parents, would I feel less regret? If I had studied what I loved instead of what others wanted, would my eyes look different now? These questions show that what we are truly searching for is not only another history. We are searching for another self, another way of existing, another feeling about who we are. But we also need to remember that imagined versions are often unevenly lit. The mind can beautify the road not taken. It can ignore the difficulties of the alternative life. The person who opened the restaurant might have been happier, but he might also have been exhausted from rent debt. The person who confessed love might have been loved in return, but might also have hurt many people. The person who moved far away might have found freedom, but might also have felt lonely in a cold room. The road not taken is usually silent, so it is easy for us to pour the softest light of dreams onto it. To think honestly, we must admit that every branch of life has its cost. No version is made only of moonlight. That is why the question, is there another version of you, can bring peace if we do not use it to escape the present. It should not become a mirror that makes us hate the life we have. It should become a mirror that helps us understand that we have passed through many possibilities to arrive at this moment. Maybe we lost some roads, but we also received certain things that only this road could have given us. A person who did not pursue a dream career may have built a warm family. A person who did not speak their love may have learned respect and release. A person who did not begin again when young may begin again later in a deeper way. An imperfect life is not a failed life. It is simply a real life. In the idea of parallel worlds, our copy is often imagined as someone who split away from us at a turning point. But in psychological life, our versions do not fully split apart like that. They live layered inside the same person. A strict father may still carry within him the boy who once wanted to be held more often. A busy mother may still keep inside her the young woman who wanted to travel everywhere with a camera. A retired person may still hear within themselves the call of the young person who was not afraid to begin. We are not a single flat being. We are many times, many desires, many wounds, and many hopes woven together inside one body that grows older each day. When we see an older person sitting quietly by the window, we often see only their present shape. But inside them there may be an entire gentle crowd. There is the child who once ran across the yard. There is the young person who once fell in love for the first time. There is the adult who carried responsibility too early. There is the person who made mistakes. There is the person who forgave. There is the person who could not forgive. There is the person who once wanted to leave. There is the person who stayed because of a promise. These versions are not copies in another universe, but they are proof that every human being is already a kind of inner multiverse. We live one life, but inside that one life, many layers of the self coexist. This does not conflict with science. Our brain truly has the ability to travel through mental time. We can remember the past, imagine the future, and build counterfactual situations, meaning situations that could have happened but did not. These processes often rely on memory, imagery, emotion, and the ability to recombine experience. So when we imagine another life, we do not create it from nothing. We take materials from real life, a face, a place, a sentence, a feeling we once had, and then arrange them into another branch. This is why imagined lives can sometimes feel so convincing. They are woven with threads from things that once touched us. But because they are woven from memory, they can also change. Each time we remember an old event, we do not simply take it out like an object from a box. We may reconstruct it, emphasize one detail, blur another, and add present emotion to it. A decision that once made perfect sense in the past may be remembered as cowardice when we are sad. A choice that was painful but necessary may be idealized as a mistake when we are lonely. So when we think about another version of ourselves, we need compassion, but we also need clarity. Do not let an imagined self become the judge of the present self. The person living right now had to choose inside real circumstances, with real information, real fear, real limits, and the real heart of that moment. Maybe this is one of the kindest lessons of this subject. If there are other versions of us in imagination, we do not need to use them to blame ourselves. We can use them to understand ourselves. The version who dared to speak love shows that we once longed for honesty. The version who left shows that we once longed for freedom. The version who pursued art shows that we once longed for expression. The version who lived quietly shows that we once longed for safety. Each version is not a sentence of condemnation, it is a sign. It tells us that deep inside there are needs that have not been heard, dreams that are still breathing, and parts of the soul that still want to be recognized. And seen this way, the question of parallel worlds is no longer only a question about the universe. It becomes a gentle way of healing. We can sit with the lives we did not live and say, I know you once could have existed. I know you once called to me. I know there were things I did not choose. But I also know I cannot live every life. No one can walk every road. No one can love every person they might once have loved. No one can keep every chance, save every relationship, or become every version. To be human is to be finite. And because we are finite, every choice has weight. That finiteness can be sad, but it also gives life its shape. If we could live every possibility at once, perhaps no choice would remain sacred. Because we live only one stream of consciousness, one chain of days, one body, an apology has value. A fresh start has value. A morning when we are still able to wake up has value. We do not need another universe for everything to become profound. Sometimes, the very fact that we cannot become everything makes the present person more worthy of tenderness. You are not the whole of all your possibilities. You are the possibility that survived through time to arrive here. When we say, there may not be another person living in your place, that sentence sounds as if it is closing a door, but in truth, it also opens another door. It brings us back to the only person we can truly care for, ourselves in this branch of life. If you once missed an opportunity, you can still ask what that opportunity taught you. If you were once silent when you should have spoken, you can still learn to speak more truthfully in the present. If you once chose safety instead of freedom, you can still find a small space of freedom in your life today. Other versions do not need to be proven somewhere out in the universe in order to help us live more awake. They can become messengers from the deeper part of ourselves, and perhaps that is where science and spirituality can meet beautifully. Science reminds us that identity is not an unchanging stone. It is maintained by memory, by personal narrative, by the brain continually connecting past, present, and future. Spirituality, in a gentler language, reminds us that human beings are not only names, jobs, ages, or the roles they carry. Inside us are deeper layers, images, wounds, and lights that have not gone out. If we call them other versions of ourselves, that may be a symbolic way of speaking. If we call them autobiographical memory and counterfactual simulation, that is a scientific way of speaking. These two ways of speaking are different, but they point toward the same thing. The human self is far deeper than it appears. Imagine walking into an old house that belongs to you. Each room is a moment in time. The first room has the laughter of a child. The second room has a letter never sent. The third room has the clothes of a job you once dreamed of. The fourth room has the chair where you once sat through a sleepless night. wondering whether you should leave. At the end of the hallway, there is a locked room where unlived possibilities lie still like photographs that have not yet been developed. You do not need to break down the door. You only need to stand outside, place your hand on the handle, and admit that they were once part of you. Sometimes that admission is enough to make the heart lighter. Because the most painful thing is not always that we chose wrong. Sometimes the most painful thing is that we were never allowed to grieve the road we did not choose. People often say, "Do not regret, do not look back, keep living." But the human heart is not as simple as a slogan. Some things need to be mourned in a healthy way before they can be released. Some versions of us need to be given a farewell. The one who could have become a musician in a small restaurant. The one who could have lived in a distant mountain region. The one who could have said, "I love you." The one who could have started over from the beginning. We do not need to hate them. We also do not need to chase after them. We only need to look at them with tenderness, then return to the life we have. And when we return, we may realize something very strange. The present self is not as poor as we thought. It is not what remains after all beautiful possibilities have been lost. It is the result of survival, adaptation, endurance, learning, and love inside specific circumstances. It has scratches that imagined versions may not have, but it also has gifts those other versions do not know. It knows the people whom only this road could have met. It holds the memories that only this branch could have created. It has passed through seasons that no imagined version definitely passed through. So when we mourn the lives we did not live, we can also bow our heads and thank the life we have lived. Maybe this is how the question of parallel worlds helps us grow older more gently. When we are young, we often think there are countless roads ahead. When we grow older, we realize many roads have closed. But instead of only hurting because of the closed doors, we can see them as traces of a rich life. Only someone who once had a dream has a road not taken. Only someone who once loved has words left unsaid. Only someone who once stood before a choice has a branch of life left behind. These things prove that we have lived, wanted, hoped, feared, and tried. They do not make us lesser. They make us more human. And even though science has not proven a copy out there, the very question of that copy still brings us back to a deep truth. The self is not a tiny point standing still. It is a current. The you at 10 years old is no longer exactly the you of today, but that child has not completely disappeared either. The you at 30 may be very different from the you at 70, but between them there is still a thread of memory, body, name, voice, habit, and meaning. We feel that we are the same person across many years, not because we do not change, but because the brain and the life story keep connecting those changes into one stream. In that stream, the old versions, the present version, and the possible future versions together create the feeling of I. This makes the idea of another version in a parallel universe both fascinating and difficult to hold. If there were a person like you who had long lived through another history, would that person still be you? If the memories began to diverge, if the relationships changed, if the personality changed because the experiences were different, at what point would that person become someone else entirely? A copy is not only a face. A human being is made of history. If the history is different, the pain is different, the love is different, and the mistakes are different, then the self is different too. So even if some model allows us to imagine a copy, the question is that still me is not simple at all. It moves from physics to philosophy, from philosophy to psychology, and from psychology back to the heart. Perhaps another version, if one exists, cannot comfort us in the way we imagine. That person cannot live in our place. They cannot repair the words we said. They cannot hold the person we lost. They cannot return youth to this branch of life. If that person exists, they will also have losses of their own, regrets of their own, and sleepless nights of their own. And if that person does not exist, that absence does not make our life empty. Because the fact that we are here, in a body that can breathe, in a consciousness that can remember, in a night that can listen to a great question, is already no small thing. So instead of asking the question as a form of escape, we can ask it as a gentle ritual. Is there another version of me? Maybe no one knows yet, but there are versions inside me that I can recognize. There is a child who needs forgiveness. There is a young person who needs gratitude. There is someone who was once afraid and needs to be held again. There is a present self who needs rest. There is a future self waiting for me to live a little more gently today. If the parallel world out there is still a mystery, then the parallel world inside us is already deep enough to enter with kindness. And here, we can let the questions settle like stardust falling very slowly. Maybe there is no other person living in your place inside a hidden dimension. Maybe there is no copy repairing the things you once missed. But you yourself, in this life, were once many possibilities before becoming the person listening to tonight's story. You have been the things you chose and the things you did not choose. You have been the road taken and the shadow of the road not taken. You have been memory, regret, courage, fear, loss, and hope. And whether reality ultimately contains one universe or many universes, this branch of life is still giving you something very real, the chance to understand yourself more deeply, more softly, and more peacefully. But after passing through choices, identity, and unlived lives, there is still another door that feels very familiar, one that human beings can come close to every night. That door is the dream. In dreams, we can meet places we have never visited, people we have lost, houses that do not belong to real life, and scenes that feel both strange and familiar. Some dreams make us wake with the feeling that we have just returned from another reality. Some moments of déjà vu make us shiver, as if the present has already happened somewhere. Science has careful ways to explain these things, but their mysterious feeling remains, and perhaps to understand why parallel worlds have always haunted human beings, we need to step next into the softest region of the mind, the place where dreams, memory, and reality sometimes touch each other like two layers of mist in the night. Perhaps there is no place in human life that feels more like a parallel world than a dream. Every night, when the body lies still, when the room remains where it is, when the hand has not left the blanket, the mind can open roads that no one else can see. We can step into a house we have never visited, walk along a street that belongs to no real city, meet someone who feels both strange and familiar, hear a voice that has been gone for a long time, or live inside a story that, when we wake, we cannot explain why it felt so real. No door has opened in the room, no telescope has carried us far away, no device has proven that we left this world. But for a few minutes, or for a few blurry moments before waking, we feel as if we have just returned from somewhere else. Dreams have a very quiet power. They do not need permission from reason. They do not need to follow the order of everyday life. Someone who passed away many years ago can sit at the dining table as if they never left. A childhood home can connect to a hallway in a hospital, then open onto a beach you have never seen. A child can have the face of an old friend. A city can hold the light of winter, the scent of summer, and the sadness of a farewell from long ago. All of these things mix together, without a map, without a clock, but with their own kind of emotional logic. While we are dreaming, we usually do not find it absurd. We accept it as if it were the real world. Only when we wake do we sit still for a few seconds, look at the ceiling, and wonder, where was I just now? That question matters deeply in our journey because it touches the same curiosity. Are there other layers of reality? But here, we have to move very slowly. Dreams are not proof that we have stepped into a parallel world. Neuroscience has many more cautious ways to understand dreams. During sleep, the brain is still active. It does not shut off like a house that has lost power. It processes memory, emotion, images, fears, desires, fragments of the day that has passed, old memories buried deep within, and predictions that have not yet taken shape. Those fragments can be combined into dream scenes. So a dream can feel like another life, not because it truly comes from another universe, but because the brain has the ability to build an inner world from the materials of our own life. But that does not make dreams less miraculous. On the contrary, it makes them miraculous in a more intimate way. Think about it. From scattered memories alone, the brain can create a room with light, a face with expression, a story with emotion, an event that makes the heart beat faster, a meeting that makes us wake with tears. If a painter needs colour, brushes, and canvas, then the dreaming brain seems to use fragments of past life to paint a stage without walls. A scent from childhood, an unspoken worry, someone far away, an image briefly seen during the day, all of them can meet in the night and become a place we have never known, yet somehow find strangely familiar. Some dreams make us feel as if we have lived another life, not a life long in years, but a life dense with emotion. You may dream that you are in a house by a lake. In the dream, you know exactly where the keys are kept, which door leads to the garden, and who is standing in the kitchen, even though when you wake, you have never seen that house in real life. You may dream of a child calling you by an affectionate name, and in the dream your love for that child feels so real that when you wake, you still feel an empty space in your chest. You may dream that you're older, younger, living in another city, doing another job, loving another person. When you wake, all of it dissolves quickly like mist, but the emotion that remains does not dissolve right away. It stays like a handprint on glass. It is that remaining emotion that makes dreams feel like a doorway. Not a physical doorway into a parallel world, but a doorway into possibilities the mind has never fully lived. Someone who is very calm during the day may dream of crying out in front of a person they have lost. Someone who thought they had forgotten an old love may dream of a peaceful meeting, with no resentment and no regret. Someone who once missed an opportunity may dream of following that opportunity, then wake with the feeling that they have just been shown a film that was never released. Dreams like these do not prove that the film is happening somewhere out there, but they show that the mind can still return to crossroads, rearrange emotions, try living another variation, and sometimes help us understand what we did not understand while awake. Perhaps dreams are where unlived lives are allowed to try on a shape. During the day, we are limited by schedules, age, responsibility, the body, and identity. At night, those limits soften. An older person can dream of being a child again, running across a meadow. Someone whose parents are no longer alive can dream of sitting beside them in the old room. Someone who has never left their hometown can dream of walking through a cold train station, holding an old suitcase, feeling both afraid and free. The dream does not ask whether this is reasonable, it simply opens. And inside that opening, we sometimes feel as if another self has been allowed to breathe. But if a dream is an inner world, it also reminds us to be careful with the word real. Some things are not real in the physical sense, but they are real in the sense of experience. The dragon in a dream does not leave footprints on the floor, but the fear of running from it is real in the body while the dream is happening. The person who has passed away may not truly be sitting beside us in a way science can measure, but the warmth of hearing their voice in a dream can be real to the heart. A house in a dream has no address on a map, but the feeling of belonging there can be real for a few minutes after waking. So when we speak about dreams and parallel worlds, we need to make a distinction. A dream may not be an external reality, but it is still a very powerful subjective reality. This distinction helps us avoid two extremes. One extreme is saying that every dream is a journey into another world. That sounds captivating, but there is no certain evidence for it. The other extreme is treating dreams as nothing more than meaningless waste from the brain. That is too poor an explanation because dreams often carry very real emotions, memories, worries, and desires. The gentler path is to see dreams as an in-between region, not evidence of the multiverse, but a place where the mind gives us the feeling that the world may be softer, more layered, and less fixed than it seems during the day. In that region, the question, what if things had been different, does not need to be spoken in words. It appears by itself as scenery, characters, voices, and light. There is one kind of dream that feels very close to tonight's subject, a dream about an ordinary life that is not our own life, not a dream of flying, not a dream of monsters, not a dream of falling from a great height, just a morning in another kitchen, a different partner pouring water, an old dog lying on the porch, another road leading to work. In the dream, you're not surprised. You know those things as if you have lived there for many years. Then you wake in your real room, and that feeling slowly slips from your hands. Part of you feels relieved. Another part feels slightly wistful, as if you have just left a world no one else knows. These ordinary dreams can sometimes give us chills more than bizarre dreams do, because they feel like a branch of life that could have happened. From a scientific perspective, that feeling may come from the way the brain combines memories and emotions. The kitchen in the dream may borrow light from your childhood home, the wooden table from a restaurant you once visited, the feeling of familiarity from a current relationship, and the regret from an old choice. The brain does not need to tell us where it took each piece from. It simply builds a seamless scene. And because the emotion is so strong, we believe in that scene while we are dreaming. It is like a film edited so skillfully that the audience forgets they are watching assembled shots, because the story touches exactly the right feeling inside. Dreams are like that. They may be assembled, but that assembly can still make the soul tremble. Then there is another phenomenon, shorter than a dream but sometimes even stranger: déjà vu. It is when you enter a place for the first time, hear a sentence for the first time, or see a corner of light for the first time, and suddenly feel as if you have already lived through that moment. It is not merely familiarity, it is familiarity slightly out of rhythm, a feeling both close and wrong. Your reason knows that this is happening for the first time, but some part of the mind whispers, "I have been here before. I have heard this sentence before. I have stood in this exact place, in this exact light, with this exact feeling." Déjà vu is powerful because it happens while we are awake. Unlike dreams, it does not need the protection of night. It appears in the middle of ordinary life, right on the surface of familiar reality. A person may be walking through a hospital corridor, hearing shoes against the floor, and suddenly everything becomes strange. The smell of disinfectant, the colour of a passerby's shirt, the nurse's words. All of it feels as if it has already happened in another layer of time. A person may be sitting at dinner with family, someone lifting a glass of water, light touching the table, and suddenly feel that the moment has repeated. It lasts only a few seconds, then dissolves. But in those few seconds, the present seems to open slightly, revealing a shadow layer behind it. Because that feeling is so strange, many people have wondered whether déjà vu might be a sign of a parallel world. Did we just touch the memory of another version of ourselves? Did another branch of reality overlap with this one for one very thin moment? Has the soul passed through this scene before in another life? Those questions are easy to understand because déjà vu truly feels like a small glitch in the flow of time. But the careful scientific view does not need parallel worlds to explain this phenomenon. Many studies see déjà vu as a kind of mismatch in the systems of familiarity and memory. A new situation is given a feeling of familiarity by the brain, while another part of awareness still knows that this familiarity is not correct. To put it more simply, déjà vu may happen when the signal of familiarity turns on in the wrong place. Normally, familiarity is a very useful tool. You see a face and know you have met that person. You step into an old house and everything feels familiar. You hear a melody and know you've heard it before. But sometimes, the feeling of familiarity can appear in a new context, giving you two conflicting experiences at once. The scene is new, but the feeling says it is old. That contradiction is the shiver of déjà vu. It is like a memory bell ringing in a room where no familiar person is present. Some phenomena related to the temporal lobe of the brain also show a connection between déjà vu and memory systems. In some people with temporal lobe epilepsy, the feeling of déjà vu can appear as part of a seizure or as a warning state before one. This does not mean that every ordinary déjà vu experience is a medical problem. Many healthy people have experienced déjà vu, but neurological cases show that the feeling of having already experienced this can be produced by brain activity, especially in regions connected to memory and familiarity. This is a very important point. An experience can feel deeply mysterious, but still have a biological foundation. That does not take away the beauty of déjà vu. On the contrary, it makes it more human. Think about it. One familiarity signal out of rhythm is enough to make the entire present feel deep, as if time has a fold in it. Our brain does not only record the world, it also decides whether this world feels familiar or strange, old or new, safe or unfamiliar. When that mechanism trembles in an unusual way, the present can suddenly feel like a memory. Without needing a real parallel universe, we can still feel as if two layers of time have touched. And that feeling shows how much our experience of reality depends on the way the brain weaves meaning into the flow of events. Here, the question of parallel worlds becomes more subtle. Déjà vu may not be evidence of another branch of reality, but it shows that what we call reality as it is happening always passes through the filter of memory. We do not only see a scene. We feel whether the scene is new or old. We do not only hear a sentence. We feel whether that sentence has any echo within us. We do not only live in time. We experience time through a nervous system that can sometimes misfire, repeat, or create familiarity in the wrong place. And when that filter changes rhythm, the ordinary world can become as strange as a waking dream. There is a related phenomenon in which something familiar suddenly becomes unfamiliar, sometimes called jamais vu. For example, you may stare at a very familiar word for so long that it suddenly begins to look strange. You may look at your own room in a different mood and feel as if it does not belong to you. These moments also show that familiarity is not a fixed property of objects. It is an experience created by the brain. A room does not shine by itself with familiarity. The brain attaches the feeling of familiarity to the room. When that attachment slips, the familiar can become strange, and the strange can become familiar. So it is not hard to understand why déjà vu makes us think of another reality. It colours the present with the shade of memory. But between science and spirituality, we can still place a quiet pause. Some things science explains through brain mechanisms. Some things spirituality calls intuition, signs, echoes of the soul, or a feeling that life is not completely sealed shut. In a gentle journey meant for sleep, we do not need to turn these two ways of speaking into an argument. We can place them beside each other like two lamps shining into the same mist. The lamp of science helps us not wander into baseless claims. The lamp of spirituality helps us not impoverish experience by seeing human beings only as cold machines. Between those two lamps, dreams and déjà vu appear as borderlands of consciousness, where the world seems both real and not real. What matters is not calling symbol evidence. When someone dreams of a loved one who has passed away and wakes with a feeling of comfort, we do not need to say with certainty that the loved one truly sent a signal from another world. We also do not need to tear that comfort away from them with a dry explanation. We can say that dream may come from memory, love, grief, and the way the brain processes emotion during sleep. But the meaning it leaves behind can still be very real. It can help someone cry, forgive, or continue living more gently. Scientific truth and spiritual meaning do not always need to cancel each other out. They may belong to two different layers of the same experience. Similarly, when someone experiences déjà vu and feels as if they have just touched another layer of reality, we can respect that feeling while still keeping our honesty. We can say, that feeling is truly strange, truly worth reflecting on, but at present, there is no evidence that déjà vu is a memory from a parallel world. A more cautious understanding is that the brain may create a distorted feeling of familiarity, or a kind of conflict between memory signals and memory checking. Saying this does not close every mystery. It only helps us avoid mistaking a strong feeling for certain evidence. A shiver can be a doorway into reflection, but it is not yet a map of the universe. There is something very human and beautiful in this. We do not only need to know what is real in the measurable sense, we also need to understand why something uncertain can still touch us. Dreams touch grief because they allow someone who is gone to return in a soft scene. Déjà vu touches the mystery of time because it makes the present feel like memory. These experiences do not prove the multiverse, but they help us feel a deeper question. How unstable can the human experience of reality become? If the brain can make a new scene feel familiar, make someone we lost return in a dream, and make an unlived life appear as if it were real, then the waking self is also more fragile than we imagine. And that fragility connects this part to the whole journey. We have moved from unlived choices to quantum particles to bubble universes to hidden dimensions, and then back into dreams. Each place has its own way of saying that what we see is not necessarily the whole. But each place also requires its own caution. Unlived choices do not prove that copies exist. Quantum particles do not prove that every dream is another universe. Bubble universes have not been directly observed. Hidden dimensions remain unconfirmed theory. Dreams and déjà vu may have neurological foundations. But all of them together create a very deep region of reflection. The reality we live in may be a meeting point between the outside world and the way inner consciousness builds meaning. Imagine consciousness as a lake at night. The outside world is the star-filled sky above. Memory is the soft mud at the bottom. Emotion is the wind. Dreams are reflections distorted by that wind. Déjà vu is the moment when a reflected star appears in a place where we feel we have seen it before. The lake does not create the sky, but it also does not reflect the sky in a completely neutral way. It has its own depth, its own movement, its own ripples. In the same way, we do not create the universe through our thoughts, but we experience the universe through our brain, memory, and consciousness. So sometimes, the world we live in inwardly is different from the world measured by instruments. Both matter, but they are not the same thing. Maybe you have woken from a very real dream and needed a few seconds to remember where you were. In those few seconds, two worlds overlap. The world of the dream fading away and the world of the room appearing. You recognize the blanket, the wall, the dim light, but inside you, the echo of the place you have just left remains. That transition is very thin, very mysterious. It gives us the feeling that reality does not arrive all at once, but is put back together by the brain little by little as we wake. Our name, the date, our work, our relationships, our worries, all return like birds flying back to the nest. It lasts only a few seconds, but in those few seconds we can feel the fragility of the waking world. Maybe that is why dreams so easily make human beings think about parallel worlds. Not because dreams prove them, but because dreams give us a direct experience of living in another reality, even if that reality is created by the brain. While we are dreaming, we can believe. When we wake, we know it was a dream. That transition teaches us one humble thing. The feeling of being very real does not always guarantee that an experience exists outside us. But it also teaches the opposite. An experience that does not exist outside us can still be real inside us. This is the deepest region of the story. Parallel worlds, if they exist, are a question of the universe. Dreams are a question of consciousness. And sometimes, those two questions resemble each other because both make us less absolutely certain about the borders of what is real. In spiritual traditions, dreams are often seen as a place of messages, a meeting region with souls, ancestors, intuition, or deep symbols of the mind. In modern science, dreams are studied as brain activity during sleep, connected to memory, emotion, information processing, and the construction of experience. These two ways of seeing are different, but both recognize that dreams can have an impact. A dream can change the mood of an entire day. A dream can make us call someone after many years of silence. A dream can make us realize that we are still hurting. A dream can remind us that somewhere inside there is still an unanswered question. Whatever language we use, dreams remain a region that human beings cannot completely dismiss. It is the same with déjà vu. It usually lasts only briefly, but it can leave a long aftertaste. After one moment of déjà vu, some people suddenly feel that time is no longer a simple straight line. Some people feel as if life has secret loops. Some feel that the ordinary has become sacred, as if one small moment had been marked in advance. Science can speak about distorted familiarity, memory, and the temporal lobe, but the subjective meaning still belongs to the person experiencing it. What we need to remember is this, that meaning can have its own value, as long as we do not turn it into a scientific claim that goes beyond the evidence. So this story is not meant to take the mystery out of dreams or déjà vu. It is meant to keep that mystery clear. A beautiful mist does not need to be called a doorway if we do not yet know whether it can open. A beautiful echo does not need to be called a signal from another universe if we do not have a way to verify it. We can let them be mist, echo, and the borderlands of consciousness. Sometimes the very act of not forcing them to become evidence allows them to keep their depth. They remind us that human beings do not live by facts alone, but also by dreams, memories, symbols, and questions that cannot be answered right away. But if all of this is only hypothesis, only feeling, only mathematical models, only the brain's activity in the night, then the final question becomes more important than ever. How could we know whether a parallel world is real? Not feel as if it is real, not hear a beautiful story about it, not have a dream so clear it feels undeniable, not experience a moment of déjà vu that chills the heart. But know in the scientific sense, is there any trace that can be observed, measured, tested, repeated, or at least used to make predictions that differ from existing explanations? This is where the journey needs to return to the lamp of evidence, because the farther we travel into mystery, the more honesty we need so we do not lose our way. And perhaps that honesty does not take away peaceful sleep. It makes peaceful sleep even deeper. We do not have to choose between blind belief and cold denial. We can lie still between two shores. One shore is science, reminding us that dreams and déjà vu can be understood through the brain, memory, and emotion. The other shore is the mystery of experience, reminding us that the inner life of human beings is wider than what can be fully captured in one explanation. Between those two shores is the slow water of the question. If a parallel world exists, how would we recognize it? And if we have not recognized it yet, how can we live with the beauty of the unknown? After everything we have moved through, from the unlived choices inside the human heart, to quantum possibilities, to bubble universes, hidden spatial dimensions, dreams, and déjà vu, there is one question that needs to be placed down very slowly, very clearly, like setting a lamp on a table in the dark. How can we know whether a parallel world is real or not? Not merely feel that it could exist? Not simply because the idea is beautiful, deep, fascinating, or makes the heart tremble. Not because of a dream that felt too real, a moment of déjà vu that felt too strange, or a headline online that startled us. But to know in the most serious scientific sense, is there any trace that can be observed, measured, tested, or at least used to make a different prediction that human beings can compare with reality? An idea can be as beautiful as moonlight on water, but beauty is not enough to turn it into solid knowledge. A hypothesis can give us chills, but chills are not evidence. A model can be very elegant in mathematics, but if it leaves no trace in the testable world, we have to be careful when calling it truth. This is not the coldness of science. This is the humility of science. Science does not say that only what human beings currently know can exist. Science only says that, in order to affirm something as real in the shared sense of knowledge, we need more than belief, more than excitement, and more than a well-told story. Imagine someone standing before a forest in the mist. They hear a branch move softly, see a blurry shadow pass by very quickly, and wonder whether there is a deer there. Maybe there is, maybe there is not. If that person says, "I have a feeling there is a deer," that is a real feeling. If that person says, "I am certain there is a deer," then they need more. Footprints, a clearer sound, an image, or some way to check. Parallel worlds are similar. They may be a possibility in some models. They may be a very powerful image in the mind. They may be an interpretation of quantum mechanics. They may be a direction of thought in cosmology. But to say they truly exist with certainty, we need their footprints in the forest of reality. The problem is that if a parallel world is completely separate from our world, finding those footprints becomes extremely difficult. If no light travels from there to here, if no particles are exchanged, if no force leaves an effect, if no signal crosses the boundary between two realities, then how could we test it? A door that never opens, a call that never reaches us, a sky that never sends its light into ours. That is both the beauty and the difficulty of the multiverse idea. It expands the imagination, but it also places science before a very high wall. In cosmology, we're already familiar with the limit of the observable horizon. We do not see everything. We see the part of the universe whose light has had enough time to reach us. Beyond that boundary, there may be more space, but if light or information cannot reach us, we cannot observe it directly. With multiverse hypotheses, the difficulty becomes even deeper. If other universes are regions that no longer have any causal connection with our universe, they may remain forever beyond every telescope. A telescope can look very far, but it still needs light or a signal. If there is no signal, silence does not prove that nothing exists, but it also does not prove that something exists. It is only silence. This is what makes many scientists cautious. A strong scientific theory does not only tell a good story, it should give us some way to test it. For example, if a model predicts a form of radiation, a type of fluctuation, a trace in the cosmic background radiation, a new particle, a small gravitational effect, or a measurable deviation, then we can search for it. If we find it, the model becomes stronger. If we do not find it under good enough conditions, the model is challenged. That is how science moves step by step, not through absolute belief, but through a continuous conversation between ideas and data. The more a hypothesis separates itself from testability, the closer it moves toward the boundary between science, philosophy, and speculation. But we should also be fair. Not every idea that is difficult to test is meaningless. Many great ideas in science began as bold reasoning before tools existed to test them directly. Gravitational waves were a prediction of general relativity for more than a century before they were directly detected. Atoms were debated for a long time before modern evidence became strong enough. So just because an idea is difficult to test now does not mean it will remain outside science forever. What matters is whether it is connected to a serious model, whether it produces any consequences that can be tested indirectly, and whether it is honest about its level of certainty. With parallel worlds, the picture is more complicated because there are many different kinds of parallel. The many worlds interpretation in quantum mechanics is a way of understanding the measurement problem. It is not the same as the idea of bubble universes in cosmic inflation. It is also not the same as hidden spatial dimensions or brains. And all of those are different from the spiritual feeling of many layers of reality, or the feeling in a dream that we have just lived another life. When everything is gathered under the phrase parallel worlds, the listener can easily be pulled into vagueness. So testing begins by asking clearly, what kind of parallel world are we talking about? If we're talking about the many worlds interpretation, the question of testing is very difficult, because many interpretations of quantum mechanics can give the same experimental predictions in known situations. They differ in how they understand what is happening behind the measured result. This interpretation can be very serious and beautiful in its theoretical structure, but it does not simply give us an easy experiment that says, here, another branch has been photographed. If we're talking about the cosmological multiverse, testing may involve indirect traces in cosmic background radiation, in the large-scale structure of the universe, or in predictions from inflation models. But many forms of the multiverse are still criticized for being too far beyond observation. If we are talking about hidden dimensions, we may look for signs at high energy scales, in gravity, or in small physical effects, but there is still no direct evidence confirming those dimensions as a path into another world. And if we are talking about dreams, déjà vu, intuition, or the feeling that I have lived another life before, then science follows a completely different path. It asks how the brain works, how memory is reconstructed, why the feeling of familiarity can fall out of rhythm, and how sleep processes emotion and imagery. These things can make the experience easier to understand, but they do not turn the experience into evidence of another universe. A dream can be spiritually deep. A moment of déjà vu can make someone fall silent for a long time. But to prove parallel worlds, we need more than personal feeling, because personal feeling is not easy to test independently, not easy to repeat, and not easy to separate from ordinary brain activity. So the honesty of this journey lies in not turning the unknown into the known. If someone says, I feel as if there is another life of mine, we can listen. If a physicist says, some models suggest the possibility of many branches or many cosmic regions, we can reflect. If a cosmologist says, there may be parts of reality beyond the observable horizon, we can expand the imagination. But if someone says, science has proven with certainty that your copy is living in a parallel world, we need to pause. A claim that large requires evidence large enough to match it, and at present, that direct evidence does not exist. In an age when information moves very quickly, this is especially important. From time to time, we see headlines claiming that a space agency, an experiment team, or a scientific paper has discovered a parallel world. Those headlines are often written to make people click immediately. They take a difficult result, a speculative hypothesis, or an unexplained anomaly, then turn it into a very certain story. The reader sees only the words "has discovered," while inside the real research, scientists may only be saying, there is a strange phenomenon that needs further explanation, or one speculative possibility is, or the data is not enough to conclude. Between those two ways of speaking, there is an entire canyon. One famous example is the story that spread widely claiming that the National Aeronautics and Space Administration had discovered a parallel universe where time runs backward. That story was connected to unusual results from the Antarctic Impulsive Transient Antenna experiment in Antarctica, an experiment searching for signals from high-energy particles. Those unusual signals were genuinely interesting and worth studying, but saying that they proved a parallel universe was a leap much too far. Later fact-checking showed that the original research and the National Aeronautics and Space Administration did not claim to have discovered a parallel world in the way sensational headlines suggested. This is a very clear lesson. An unexplained phenomenon does not automatically become evidence for the strangest explanation. Imagine hearing a sound on the roof at night. It could be the wind, it could be a tree branch, it could be a bird, it could be something else. But if we immediately say it's a creature from another universe, we have skipped over many closer possibilities. Science usually moves in the opposite way. It does not begin with the most dramatic explanation. It begins with grounded explanations, checks them one by one, gradually rules them out, and only considers stranger possibilities if the data truly forces us to. This is not because science hates wonder. On the contrary, science loves wonder enough not to replace it with rushed imagination. An unusual phenomenon is very valuable, but it is also very easy to misunderstand. In the history of science, some anomalies have led to major discoveries, but many anomalies have disappeared when measurements improved, when instrument errors were found, when researchers understood more about the environment, or when a less strange explanation became available. So strange data should not be dismissed, but it should also not be exaggerated. It is like a distant light on the sea. We need to look more carefully, use better instruments, and ask whether it is a ship, a star, a shore light, or a reflection on the waves. If we say with certainty that it is a doorway into another world just because it is beautiful, we have lost the seriousness of the search itself. This brings us to a deeper question. Why do human beings like headlines such as "Parallel World Discovered" so much? Perhaps because they touch very deep desires. We want life to contain secrets. We want the things we have lost to still exist somewhere. We want science, which often seems dry, to suddenly confirm a mysterious feeling we once had. We want the universe to be not only cold matter, but a house with many rooms where there may still be unopened doors. These desires are not bad, they are deeply human, but precisely because they are so strong, we are more likely to believe a story that matches what we want. Clarity does not extinguish that desire, it only keeps that desire from being used against us. A gentle video about parallel worlds does not need to frighten listeners with exaggerated certainty. It can be more compelling through honesty, because the truth is this. At present, the most honest answer is still, we do not know yet. But we do not know yet is not a dead wall. It is an open sky. It allows us to keep asking, keep observing, keep building models, keep testing, and keep correcting mistakes. We do not know yet is one of the most beautiful sentences in science when spoken with humility. It does not close the door, it only refuses to pretend that the door has already opened. We do not yet know whether the many worlds interpretation is the best way to understand quantum mechanics. We do not yet know whether cosmological multiverse models reflect a real structure beyond the observable region. We do not yet know whether extra spatial dimensions truly exist in nature. We do not yet know whether there is any way to indirectly detect another universe if it is completely separate from us. And we also do not yet know whether the strange feelings of dreams and déjà vu are only ever brain activity, or whether they hint at something deeper that our current language has not grasped. But what we do know is this. There is currently no direct evidence strong enough to say with certainty that parallel worlds exist as a proven reality. That answer may disappoint some people. After a long journey through quantum physics, the cosmos, hidden dimensions, dreams, and identity, we may want a clearer conclusion. Yes or no, exists or does not exist. But reality does not always obey that desire. There are large questions for which the most accurate answer in a given era is incompleteness. That incompleteness is not failure. It is a sign that the question is truly deep. Shallow questions are often easy to answer. Questions that touch the foundations of reality often require many generations, many tools, many mistakes, many sleepless nights, and many moments when human beings have to learn to say, "We thought we knew," but it turns out there is still so much we do not know. Think of ancient people looking up at the sky. They did not know what galaxies were. They did not know that stars were distant suns. They did not know that Earth is a planet orbiting the sun. They did not know that light has a finite speed. They did not know that the universe is expanding. To them, the sky was already a mystery. To us, the sky is still a mystery, but the mystery has changed shape. Each scientific answer does not erase mystery. It often opens a deeper mystery. When we learned that Earth was not the center, we did not lose the sky. We gained a larger universe. When we learned that galaxies contain billions of stars, we did not lose the star. We gained an ocean of light. When we learned that dreams are connected to the brain, we did not lose the dream, we gained a more wondrous brain. And if one day we understand parallel worlds more clearly, perhaps that will not destroy the miracle either. It will only change the shape of the miracle. So how could we test parallel worlds? The answer depends on the type of hypothesis. For quantum mechanics, the path may lie in understanding the foundations of quantum theory more deeply, through experiments on superposition, decoherence, quantum correlations, and any subtle differences between interpretations, if such differences exist. For cosmology, the path may lie in observing the cosmic microwave background, primordial gravitational waves, the large-scale structure of the universe, or extremely faint traces if there was ever a collision or influence between cosmic regions. For hidden dimensions, the path may lie in particle accelerators, gravity experiments at short distances, or physical signs beyond the current model. But we need to be clear, these possible tests do not mean we have already found anything. They are only possible roads to follow. And there may also be forms of parallel worlds that are completely impossible to test. If a hypothesis is built in such a way that no observation could ever make it more likely or less likely, then it becomes very difficult to place within experimental science. It may still be philosophy, it may still be poetry, it may still be meaningful speculation, but we should not call it knowledge confirmed by science. This is not meant to diminish philosophy or poetry. Human beings need both philosophy and poetry, but we need to place each thing where it belongs. A poem can make us cry, but it does not replace a telescope. An equation can predict accurately, but it does not replace comfort on a sad night. When each language is kept in its proper place, each has its own dignity. There is great peace in making this distinction. We do not need to force science to confirm every mysterious feeling we have. We also do not need to force spirituality to fall silent before questions science has not yet answered. We can live with many layers of meaning. At the scientific layer, we say, there is currently no direct evidence for parallel worlds as a confirmed reality. At the philosophical layer, we say, this question opens reflection on possibility, identity, time, and the limits of perception. At the spiritual layer, we say, the feeling of many layers of reality may be a symbol that helps human beings face loss, choice, and mystery. At the layer of life, we say, whether there are many universes or not, we are still living in this moment, with this breath. This also helps us avoid a kind of unnecessary fear. Some people, when they hear about parallel worlds, may feel unsettled, as if their life has been split into pieces, as if every choice creates a storm that cannot be understood. But if we keep the proper level of certainty, we see that there is no need to be afraid. These models do not steal our present from us. They do not make our love false. They do not make our memories meaningless. They do not force us to believe that somewhere a copy is living better or worse than we are. They only invite us to look at reality more spaciously, while also returning to care for the one branch of life that this consciousness is directly experiencing. If tomorrow a new article appears saying that parallel worlds have finally been found, what should we do? We should pause, breathe slowly, and read more carefully. Who announced it? Where was it published? Has the result been peer-reviewed? What are other scientists saying? What does the data actually show? Is there another simpler explanation? Does the headline exaggerate beyond the content of the research? This is how a curious but clear-minded person moves through the world of information. Do not reject immediately out of fear of the new. Do not believe immediately because the strange is appealing. Just move slowly, like someone carrying a lamp through a long hallway. That way of moving also fits the spirit of tonight's journey. We do not come to parallel worlds looking for a cheap shock. We come to learn how to stay close to the unknown without losing precision. We can let the heart tremble before the idea of another version of ourselves. We can let the imagination travel to bubble universes. We can feel a chill when thinking about spatial dimensions we cannot perceive. We can be moved by a dream that feels as if we returned from somewhere else. But after all of that, we can still say in a very calm voice, beautiful, deep, but not enough to affirm. And that sentence does not make the journey poorer. It makes the journey more trustworthy. Perhaps the greatest lesson of this part is this. Wonder does not need to be overstated in order to remain wonder. A star-filled sky is still beautiful, even if we do not yet know every planet. A dream is still deep even if it comes from the brain. A hypothesis is still worth considering, even if it has not been proven. A question still has value even when the answer is we do not know yet. Parallel worlds in the current state of knowledge live in that borderland. They are not meaningless things to throw away. They are also not proven facts to announce with certainty. They are a door left slightly ajar in scientific imagination, philosophy, and the human soul. And sometimes, standing before a door left slightly ajar is enough to change the way we see the room we're in. If there are more rooms out there, then this room is part of a larger house. If there is nothing out there, then this room becomes even more precious because it is the only place where the light of our life is burning. In both cases, the present does not lose its meaning. You are still here. The body is still resting. The brain is still listening. The heart is still beating steadily. All the things that have passed, the choices, the dreams, the memories, the questions about the universe, are gathering inside this very real moment. So the most honest answer right now is this. We do not yet know whether parallel worlds truly exist. Some quantum interpretations allow us to think about many branches. Some cosmological models allow us to think about many regions or many universes. Some physical theories allow us to think about hidden spatial dimensions. Dreams and déjà vu make us feel as if reality could be softer and more layered. But there is not yet direct, clear evidence, broadly confirmed by the scientific community, that allows us to say parallel worlds exist as a certain truth in the same way that Earth orbits the Sun, or that light has a finite speed. And precisely because we do not yet know, the question remains alive. It lives in laboratories, where human beings measure very small signals. It lives in telescopes, where human beings look toward very ancient light. It lives in equations, where possibilities are written in silent symbols. It lives in philosophy, where people ask what reality is, what evidence is, and what counts as a world. It lives in dreams, where unlived lives sometimes appear in soft colours. And it lives in every person who has ever wondered, if I had chosen differently, is there something of me still continuing somewhere? Maybe this question will not be solved in our lifetime. Maybe hundreds of years from now, human beings will have better tools, deeper theories, and a way of seeing that we cannot yet imagine today. Or maybe some ideas about parallel worlds will be replaced, reinterpreted, or quietly leave science. That does not make the journey useless, because the value of a question does not lie only in the final answer. It lies in the way the question teaches us to think. Curious but not gullible, open-hearted but not without reason, loving mystery but not betraying truth. And when we can hold that way of thinking, the world becomes gentler. We do not need to use science like a hammer to break every mysterious feeling. We also do not need to use mystery like a curtain to hide the lack of evidence. We can place both beside each other. On one side is the compass of verification. On the other side is the candle of meaning. The compass helps us not get lost. The candle helps us not grow cold. Between the compass and the candle, we can continue through the night without rushing, without fear, without needing to know everything immediately. So if someone asks you after listening, are parallel worlds real? Perhaps you can answer slowly. At present, science has not proven them with certainty. But the question is deeply worth considering, because it opens profound thoughts about quantum physics, the universe, spatial dimensions, dreams, memory, and the human self. An answer like that is not sensational, but it is honest. It does not close the door, but it also does not build a false door. It lets mystery remain mystery and lets knowledge remain knowledge. At this point, the journey has almost passed through its widest regions. We have not found a certain key that opens into another world. But we have found many other things: humility before the universe, softness toward old choices, caution before sensational claims, and peace in living with the words, "We do not know yet." Maybe that is the true gift of the question of parallel worlds. It does not necessarily give us another universe. It gives us another way of seeing this universe. And sometimes, when our way of seeing changes, the old room becomes deeper, the old sky becomes wider, and the life we already have becomes much more worthy of gratitude. Tonight, we have travelled a very long journey, not with our feet, but with imagination, with science, with memory, and with a very deep part of the human soul. We began with a question that is very small, and yet also very vast. What if I had chosen differently back then? From the crossroads that seem to have fallen asleep in the past, we slowly stepped into the quantum world, where tiny particles no longer behave like the familiar objects around us. From there, we looked up at the sky, toward the observable universe, toward horizons of light, toward the possibility that our universe may not be the whole of everything that exists. We moved through the idea of bubble universes, hidden spatial dimensions and realities that may be very far away or very close, yet never touched by our senses. And in the end, we returned to the most mysterious place that every person carries within. Dreams, déjà vu, memory, identity, and the strange feeling that somewhere there may still be another life of our own. But the greatest value of this journey is not that it forces us to believe that parallel worlds certainly exist. Science has not given us the right to claim that as a proven truth. No door has been opened before the eyes of humanity. No clear signal has arrived from another universe. There is no direct evidence that another version of you is living another life somewhere beyond the reach of light. And that unknown does not take away the beauty of the story. On the contrary, it makes the story more real, more humble, and deeper. Because some questions do not come to give us a quick answer. Some questions come to widen the way we see reality, the way we see ourselves, and the way we live with the things we cannot yet fully know. Maybe parallel worlds are only one interpretation within quantum physics. Maybe the multiverse is only a still debated consequence of certain cosmological models. Maybe hidden dimensions are still only mathematical structures that have not been confirmed. Maybe dreams and déjà vu are only the brain's way of mixing memory, emotion, and the feeling of familiarity. But even so, that question still leaves us with a very gentle gift. It reminds us that reality may be wider than everyday feeling. It reminds us that what the eyes see is not necessarily the whole. It reminds us that human beings do not only live through what has happened, but also carry the possibilities that could have happened, the roads not taken, the words not spoken, and the versions that never fully came into being. Maybe there is no other person living in your place in some distant universe. But in this life, you were once many possibilities before becoming the person you are now. You were once the child who did not yet know where they would go. You were once the young person standing before great choices. You were once the frightened one, the hopeful one, the regretful one, the brave one, the one who stayed, the one who left, the one who stayed silent, the one who tried one more time. All of those versions do not disappear completely. They remain in memory, in the way you love, in the way you forgive, in the way you look at a quiet afternoon and suddenly feel your heart soften. And perhaps the most miraculous thing is not how many universes exist out there, but that within one finite life, a human being can still contain so many deep layers. So if tonight the question, do parallel worlds really exist, still has no final answer, that is all right. You do not need to solve the entire universe before sleep. You do not need to know what lies beyond the horizon of light. You do not need to know what quantum possibilities ultimately say about the nature of reality. You only need to keep one gentle thing with you. We can stand before the unknown with curiosity, but without rushing to believe, with openness, but without losing honesty, with a sense of mystery, while still respecting science. That is a very beautiful way to live in a universe that still holds so many secrets. Now let that question slowly drift away, like a small star moving toward the edge of the night sky. Let the hypothetical universes, the unlived branches of life, the strange dreams, and the unopened doors all dissolve gently into the soft darkness. Return to your breath, to the body being held, to the quiet room around you, to the only branch of life you're truly feeling right now. Whether there are many worlds out there or not, this moment is still real. You are here. You have traveled a long journey, and now you are allowed to rest. Thank you for staying with Drift into Quiet Knowing on tonight's quiet journey. Sleep well. Let the mind soften. Let the heart grow lighter. Let the great questions no longer keep you awake, but gently lull you into deep sleep. May you dream softly, rest peacefully in this branch of life, and I will meet you again in the next gentle journey of quiet knowledge.